One second, let's see. It says we've got an unstable connection. Let's see if it reestablishes. Nice. Okay. Shout out to everyone out there in the world. Yo, let's go. So Sneck 44. Shout out to him. Gentlemen in the Discord, in the Cardano Collective Discord. And shout out to the Litecoin Discord and the PEP Discord. For folks that don't know, Litecoin's a proof of work blockchain. Unlike Bitcoin, SHA-256, Charlie Lee chose a different elliptic curve cryptography and S-crypt. So there's a concurrent mining network that you can participate in at the infrastructure level, and started with Litecoin, and then added Dogecoin. So like, how many people in the world know that? You know what I mean? That shout out to, all right, we got a PEP in the building. Let's go. So get this, right? Litecoin can be concurrently merge mined with more than 42. More than 40. I've heard it's like 58, something like this. More than 42 different blockchains. So the same infrastructure can validate multiple blockchains concurrently, which is a freaking beautiful monetization metric. And it allows for greater, because there's also, when you look at the elliptic curve cryptography of Bitcoin as opposed to Litecoin, literally the calculus of those curves, the ability to use GPU versus CPU when we go back to like 2011 versus 2009, and all of the reasons why Charlie Lee chose the block time. So Litecoin's 4 times as fast. Also 4 times the supply. Now here's another interesting thing. Every Bitcoin, there's 21 million of them. Each Bitcoin is fundamentally divisible by 100 million smaller units called a Satoshi. In honor of Satoshi Nakamoto, released the Bitcoin white paper, Halloween night, 2008, Genesis block around January 3rd, 2009. So this ledger's been cooking, and then Charlie Lee, October 2011, let's go, Litecoin's live. So then over the course of time, you've got Dogecoin. Dogecoin's got such an interesting background. Now, Dogecoin has an infinite supply. So if we're trying to escape infinite fiat inflation, this is one of the virtues of like a Bitcoin or a Litecoin. But Monero is a privacy coin. Also no hard cap supply. So at a fundamental level and layer, if you're going to build on Litecoin, shout out to the Litecoin VM fam. So there are folks that are endeavoring to bring smart contract expressiveness onto the Litecoin stack. And that's very, very exciting, because then it allows for additional expressiveness at that Litecoin layer. And guess what can live in these smart contracts? Shout out to Stream Elements. Yeah, bro, we got all kinds of stuff. I was exploring earlier, among things, Stream Elements. Yeah, guys, don't click links, but do share information. Do meet up in the Discords, because this is how we win. This is how we win. We educate. Scientia potentia est, knowledge is power, right? Or there is potential in science. So how do we exponentiate the value that we create? Okay, and so that was one of the fundamentally sort of powerful things when you look at the S-crypt mining network, the fact that you can have Litecoin, the 84 million unit UTXO base set. That's another thing. And that is the biggest takeaway that I want to celebrate today is UTXO-based blockchains. It stands for unspent transaction output. What that means is you can quantify a magnitude of like an asset. You can, My brain's got me thinking of scalars versus vectors. And there are aspects of a blockchain asset and of a sovereign digital asset that can be said to be a vector. They're not just a scalar term, but they can be made discrete, which is to say, when you declare a finite set, and then you say, oh, and then there's rules for every unit in the set. For instance, each is divisible by 100 million smaller units. So like the Satoshi is like the penny of a dollar. You know, how a penny has or rather a dollar has 100 smaller units in it, a penny. So we've got these Bitcoin units. And what's really interesting as we build these pyramids, when one Satoshi is equal to one penny, one Bitcoin will be worth $1 million. And I believe it will very much, I know it will. If humanity is still kicking, Bitcoin's going to get to 1 million units. Why? Among many reasons, the fiat printer is going to go burr. Fiat denominated currencies, the base of the pyramid in fiat land is the dollar. And look at how unsteady that foundation is becoming. Whereas when we build on Bitcoin, boom, the global network adheres to this 21 million unit set, and then when you look at the 84 million Litecoin, and then you look at the fact that with Litecoin and the Scrypt mining network, you can generate and validate revenue and add utility with the interoperability between the Litecoin UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs. So that's the other thing. When you link UTXO-based blockchains, you allow for deterministic transmissibility of your sovereignty. And that is so powerful. Whereas with an accounts-based model, with an infinite supply, we cross a technological Rubicon, because the UTXO-based blockchains are not the same thing as like an Ethereum virtual machine and an accounts-based model. An accounts-based model does not have that mathematical, determinism, concurrency, parallelism that you can create when you can model discretely UTXOs. UTXOs, again, it stands for unspent transaction output. So imagine, like, you can to 21 million balls. Like, I often think of a really cool model for like a blockchain, like, like an hourglass, how you turn it over, and then you've got sand that flows from one confined chamber into another. I kind of think about how Satoshi flipped that hourglass, and then those 21 million units, when Bitcoin started, the block reward was 50 Bitcoin, and then it was halved so many blocks later. It takes about 4 years. And because each block is created every 10 to 15 minutes on average in Bitcoin. And so this publicly distributed ledger is really just saying, what are all of the receive addresses that exist on the network? And what are the unspent transaction outputs that are associated therewith throughout the set? So what's wild is Bitcoin has been creating a copy of the live state of that ledger for like 17 years. Every 10 minutes. Litecoin it's coming up on 15 years. It's 14 years flawlessly. Boom, boom, there's a block. And then eventually they added something called Mimble-Wimble extension blocks, which allows for like what fungibility. But if enough people are availing themselves of this liberty, Litecoin Liberty, shout out to it, they can have fungibility such that it actually borders on privacy, because how many fish are swimming in the sea, right? And you can do a lot of really cool things with just mathematic rhapsodies, as we well know. And so MWeb extension blocks also allows for that mathematical deterministic flow between the 21 million UTXO set of Bitcoin and the 84 million set of Litecoin. But then if Litecoin also has fungibility and privacy options, and then you add PEP coin, man, see, here's the thing. What if you were a fan of proof of work blockchains? Now, relative to proof of stake, I think that, well, mathematically, it is so that the optimal solution, with the optimal efficiency, is to allow interoperability. Shout out to the Minotaur paper, which is really cool, in which it was proven that that proof of work and proof of stake concurrently is actually it's maximally fungible. It's which also future proofs the Bitcoin UTXO set. Because think about this, right? Like the Solana's ledger is several hundred terabytes. It's like 600 terabytes plus, whereas the Bitcoin ledger is still about 1 terabyte. Litecoin ledger, 100 gigabytes. So when you just think about the expressiveness, and then you have the added their UTXO based blockchains, which allows them to that interoperability. So extending this to the 45 billion unit Cardano set. You know, it is a lot of people have levied criticism at Charles Hoskinson of late, and it's which is not to say that there is not warranted feedback. Um, you know, that's just a whole situation with the inefficiencies that we see when these entities were given billions of dollars worth of assets, and then they still come to the community and then introduce sales pressure. Um, it is 6-9. It's 6-9, 2026. Shout out to Bitcoin. Bitcoin, and we're cooking at 61,000. Guys, we are not surprised. We are not surprised. Remember, we have Clarity Act coming. We got Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Hormuzing, and peace be upon the people of the world. You know what I mean? Um, Sweet. Yeah, man, we're cooking. Um, Let me check this Discord. Shout out to Sneck44. Um, yeah, man. Here, let me close that too. Cool. Yeah, just wanted to close some tabs and free up some resources. So Bitcoin's cooking at 61K. Get this, 4.4% down on the 24. Litecoin 2.73%. This is all crypto market coin market cap. Cardano's down 4.23. So relative to Bitcoin, it's pretty much on par. Check out Solana, 4.8. So this is actually good. You want to see this clustering. But what we see is Litecoin's outperforming at 2.76. When we look at Ethereum's at 3.92. So again, the broader field, we're looking at about a 4% correction. And Litecoin is one of the outliers. Incidentally, also, BNB. Let's check what that one is doing, because that also, it's interesting, 3.18. So yeah, so this is good though. This is when this is tracking the macros is what it is. So we know that the Clarity Act is coming. For folks that don't know what the hell the Clarity Act that is just what differentiates Bitcoin from a meme coin, from a utility coin, from da 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 da. It gets laws and lawyers and legislation right, so that it's how Nancy Pelosi and these folks are making their money. Shout out to, again, the SpaceX IPO. That is definitely having an impact on the liquidity environment available. Oh, nice, bro. Yeah, man. Shout out to Rakib. Yeah, I'm in Litecoin. Just worried we can go lower. So on Litecoin, bro, the whole market can go lower, right? So our most rational model that we can follow is the rising tide lifts all ships situation, with Bitcoin as the primary capital layer. Now you can look at the Ethereum as another primary capital layer. So then we have to start looking at where are they in the market, where I think Litecoin is very uniquely positioned. Okay. So for instance, and I'm gonna look at this live. I've just because, and at some point, guys, like again, I see Stream Elements is here. They've got their little bot running and whatnot. And shout out to them, man. I'm trying to do the OBS studios and da da da. StreamYard seems to be the thing, guys. It seems to be the thing. I'm looking forward to it. Which is to say, I want the quality of this to improve. I want to be able to have, oh look, at Cliff K _ and I wanted to be able to say, hey yo, the Cardano Collective, or Litecoin VM, or Pepecoin, or some Dogecoin celebration, and or bro, odds markets, guys, right? Like, I was thinking about Terrence Crawford. Shout out to Terrence Crawford, bro. Man, shout out to Timothy Bradley, bro. Shout out to Adrian Broner. Talk about no neck though. Like I'm thinking about that. Like that guy, he's got a natural he's got he's got a Philly shell like built in, you know. Anyway, shout out to Adrian Broner. Shout out to Kick, dude. Um uh Kick is pretty smooth. They're pretty smooth. Speaking of, we need to get these killer apps cooking. So as far as Litecoin, worried we can go lower. So what I want to do is I'm looking at the Ethereum all-time chart, and really it's because I want to get a rational sense. I want to get a rational sense on a relative performance situation. Okay, so 1068. And then below that, if you were super, wow, yeah, a literal decimation is by a tenth. But yeah, doesn't matter. Um, that was like outlier number that just thinking about this out loud. So I would look at like $1,000 level of Ethereum as a comparable to when we go. Here's where I think that Litecoin has an advantage here. If you look at the all-time chart of Litecoin, that $50 level, specifically, it was around $50.48 on July 2nd, 2022. And for folks that don't know, the next halving is coming up in 2027, like literally in about a year. It's due in around July, summer 27. So that's interesting, guys. So in the same way that Bitcoin started with $50 Bitcoin every 10 to 15 minutes, every block as the native block reward, and then went from 50 to 25, and then 25 to 12 and a half. So on and so forth, 6.25, 3.125, and in the next one right now, Bitcoin's at 3.125. Litecoin is still at 6.25 with a four times issuance rate. So Litecoin is about to experience in a year and a month the reduction in available supply that Bitcoin experienced in like April 2024 or whatever. Yeah, something like that. Around 420 actually. That's great. But yeah, so when I go, when I'm looking at it, dude, the $1,000 level, and again, they are radically different charts. And we've got the smart contract capability, whereas this is a silver gold paradigm. So please understand that these aren't apples to apples. I'm modeling this in my mind so I can rationally, but I would say when we go back to 2022, around 611, Litecoin hit 50, that 50-ish level off of a top of 347. Now, so that's mimetic. Litecoin, here's one thing thinking about Litecoin, and this is again to celebrate, because the power is in educating and teaching us all that by understanding our custody options, a spectrum, and one has to consider that whole mix, shout out to the Fidelities and the Bank of Americas and the whole, and Cake Wallet, and all kinds of shit, but yeah. Anyway, so that $50 level is consequential, and Litecoin's chilling at 41. And if you go from that 2022 level, so that's actually interesting, the way that they line up, that Ethereum at 1,000 is like Litecoin at 50. So Litecoin's already at a relative discount on that valuation. Now we've got a lot more. There's been so much more manipulation in some ways with Litecoin at the centralized exchange, which is why coordinated supply migration strategies are important for Bitcoin. And that's a thing. People have to know that Saylor is going to introduce and BlackRock and all the institutional suits around the world. We just want more and more around the world. Shout out to Habibi. You know what I mean? We want people bidding on Bitcoin. But all of these international players also know that Litecoin's cooking their own situation. Well, not Litecoin, rather. Congress is cooking their books with clarity, rather. Um, and Pelosi and all this. So we know we've got these major liquidity events with SpaceX and Anthropic. That money knows running into dollars isn't the way. It's going to be back to native blockchain assets. And so if you're arbitraging the power, the sovereignty of your Bitcoin capital expression, you'd be better served on a blockchain like, say, the Litecoin set. So you go from the 21 million Bitcoin set to the Litecoin set if you're looking to arbitrage value. And if you're looking to express that value, we got Litecoin VM cooking, and then we've also got Cardano. See, when we talk about like, shoot, again, Shadow Light, everyone's, this is one of those things that I will always commend Charles Hoskinson for, and is choosing to do that hard engineering, the math, to create the extended unspent transaction output model to get smart contract expressiveness on the UTXO set natively. So when you add that into the mix, bro, Litecoin is about to have two options. The virtual machine route, which is modeling a lot of the Ethereum model, which is great. So when you look at something like the PEP coin, see that's the thing. That's what's so cool. When you actually look at the Litecoin VM side and Litecoin, and then the Cardano side as well, like you have multiple avenues to liquidity. That's the other thing, is because we can bolt. We're not really just like introduce the flow with open source protocols. And that's the other thing with these UTXO sets. So whether it's the 84 million Litecoin, 21 million Bitcoin, 45 billion Cardano ADA, the 21 million Zcash guys, the 21 million Bitcoin Cash guys, strengthen the unity. And so when we can create an environment and these global hubs, which is already, they're out there, people are building them. Shout out to them. Freedom highways and byways, dude. Free markets, free minds win. That's the peaceful solution. You know what I mean? That's my chief, the thing, like Elizabeth Warren, bro. Like, again, agree with her on some things, like healthcare. We should figure that out. You know what I mean? Shout out to Bernie Sanders saying, hey, get on a boat, go to Canada, get your insulin. You know what I mean? Especially if you're going to like die, But yeah, healthcare, bro. So that's messed up. But then we're not getting that. So she's not effective in getting the things, And then she makes herself the chief antagonist against the freedom solutions. The rent has been too damn high. Shout out to that guy, That was a gentleman from New York, like a long ass time ago, was out there saying, damn, and it's only gotten worse, people can't afford to live out here. But anyway, so hey, look, Litecoin's at 42. So shout out to Rakib. He says he's worried that Litecoin can go lower. And what I would say is when we look at that in the historical context, the accumulation that we've had, at around like 80, where we've run up to 80 in February 2023 off that like $50 level, corrected back down to 64, went back down, retested in the 60, 70, back up to over 100, then down to 80, and then over to 100, and then down back to 80, right? So that's one fundamental level, institutions. And I'm looking at like Light strategy or Litecoin strategy. What is it? Light strategy or something like that. Man, the ticker's LITS, it's LITS. Shout out to Charlie Lee and the Litecoin Foundation. There are two publicly traded companies that are pursuing Litecoin strategies in the same way that Saylor has done the whole Bitcoin situation. Is it Light strategy? I don't know. I closed other things, so I'm just kind of going off the top, but doesn't matter. So we've got to look at like institutional participation. Where is that, and where is that in the chart? I mean, really, we are looking at around that 80 level, and then we're cooking over that 50, which has been the diamond floor for quite a while. And then now we're seeing this macro, because here's the thing, guys. So we're at around 40. In the same way that Bitcoin, shout out to MKXPL, in the same way that Bitcoin is being manipulated under 69 and 32 or 32,000 guys. It's fake. Like, bro, why the hell is Sailor? I mean, again, Sailor's got to prove that it's liquid, but you telling me, because look, when you even look at these charts, dude. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back on the 24. So what I would say, to land that plane, I'm not too worried, bro. Litecoin has always been suppressed at the centralized exchanges, guys. That's why coordinated migration strategies are key to pushing honesty and forcing honesty on the markets. Because get this, like Michael Saylor, for folks who don't know, right? He's got it's a fiat industrial complex, guys. Satoshi Nakamoto did not create Bitcoin so that institutions with privileged borrowing terms. I mean, Michael Saylor loves to talk about borrowing effectively 0%, $1 billion at effectively 0% interest. How does he do that? Well, right, you borrow at 4.2, you top blast Bitcoin at like 126K in the summer last whatever, and then sell it in the winter. Just buy sell, right? OTC, just put it on the books, right? To be like get on the phone with the 21 Capital, Mahlers, Jack Mahlers, right? And be like, hey, hi Jack, this is Michael, you know what I mean? And yeah, and they just sell it, and so they put that loss in their books, and that services the 4% that they borrowed the $1 billion for. But Satoshi didn't create the 21 million Bitcoin set just to empower the people that he was trying to decouple our money from, and the influence, you know, because that is dope. You know what I mean? Yeah, shout out to Rocky. Man, they're out there, bro. Well, and it's also in like it's middle of the day morning. People are out there working their asses off. Shout out to everyone in the world. Again, peace on the people of the world, man. I cannot wait. And that's another thing when we look at the prices on these markets, bro. When we get peace, when we get that, man, and it's sad what's happening. You know what I mean? Whether it's in wherever it is, whether it's in Ukraine or it's in Lebanon or it's in Iran or it's in Israel, whether it's in Palestine. Oh my gosh, bro. It's sad. It's unbecoming of our common humanity. It's sad. And that's the kind of thing when you have like a Nancy Pelosi out here getting herself in our money and she's not stopping demons at the door, bro. It's like, you said I'm one of these 535 trying to keep democracy alive. You know what I mean? Like, dude. Like, you're not going to be the thing that stops bad things. So not only are you not getting our healthcare affordable and accessible, number one cause of bankruptcy in America is medical debt, guys. So shout out to Canada and Australia and Spain and Portugal and anywhere pretty much. Germany, shit. You know what I mean? If you, man, yeah, you cannot get sick in America. Good luck. It's going to cost, yeah, we can definitely do better. But we're not getting that. And she's messing up our money. And so it's in the same way, like if you're a small business in America doing whatever, if you're denominating the value created or the whatever productive situation you're doing, and it's in dollars, there are people that own a printer and they can just make more of those. And now we're getting into an era. It's crazy, dude. It's like $1 trillion every 100 days. And we crossed that about 69-ish days ago. What? That's crazy. That's madness. That's sadness. That is an encumbrance that anyone, again, if you're denominating your plenty in dollars, you're effed with. Whereas 21 million Bitcoin divisible by 100 million units, 84 million Litecoin, each also divisible by 100 million units. But they call it Toshi, I think. Yeah. Shout out to Charlie Lee. Again, man, that's so cool, dude. For folks that don't know, man, there is a lot about Charlie Lee. It's very commendable and interesting. Like a lot of folks don't know that he wrote like all the really a lot of the founding code that allowed Coinbase to start. because when you want to be able to like, yeah, let's offer these things, and you're like, what things? Well, like Bitcoin and Litecoin, and these things. So having like a multi-asset vault that's provably secure, man, only a few minds that can actually make that into a that's a whole situation, bro. And to do it in the time scales that Charlie Lee is said to have done it is really cool, bro. It reminds me, man, there was actually a video recently of Hal Finney talking about that, about some sprints, you know. Yeah, I think a lot of creative folks buying Litecoin at these prices, like buying Bitcoin when was at its cheapest. Yes, exactly, bro. Exactly. Well, it's a lot like buying Bitcoin right now. Because here's the thing. I would model again Bitcoin, bro, under 69 to 73K. That's closer to true value. So when we see it at 61, we're seeing when Saylor said, hey, I'm gonna sell 32, chart tanks, and then he says, I'm gonna buy 13,000 or 100, 1,300 or whatever, something 13 to 1,500, I think was the number that I saw. So it's like, and again, free markets. Hey, I'd rather have that than not, like access to a free market. But that's the thing. It's not really a free market. It's not capitalism. If Sailor's allowed to do cool shit and get free credit at 0%, and everybody else is out here worrying about freaking Elizabeth Warren's ass. And again, bro, if you're not going to stop the werewolves, shit, don't mess with our money. That's why we have Second Amendment too and shit, bro. Shit is not okay in the land of the free. You know. So the peaceful solutions is money, like Litecoin and Bitcoin. See, man, there are a couple assets, but these are the bases of pyramids. So when we start talking about scaling things, so amen, like Litecoin's at a discount. So Bitcoin below 69K, you know, there's suits that have started stacking, anything below that because they know that there's leverage on the books. Whether there's people that are already committed to those Bitcoin, you know what I mean? But they'll float it. They'll be like, okay, I'll 20, execute this order by the end of the month. So that's the other thing, man. And that's why when we migrate from these centralized exchanges, the supply, we enforce honesty because a lot of these players have custodians of their assets, bro. And so when we know that they're getting bids, like I want a billion, like whatever Sailor spent, I think it was over $100 million. It was a lot. It's a lot. You don't buy 1,000 plus Bitcoin for cheap. You know what I mean? Because word is like what he sold his 32 for only like 2.5, and then bought this. Yeah. Anyway, there is an introduction of synthetic because what they're doing is they're updating dashboards. So what FTX was doing and why historically, man, when they write the books, here's something that everyone has got wrong because they keep repeating it. What do you reckon the price of Litecoin will go? Honestly, I think Litecoin is at such a discount at these levels. I think it is at a crazy discount because of how quick those multiples hit on the Litecoin side. Like how far and what is the commensurate capital that's going to move the Bitcoin set relative to the Litecoin set. So like $1 billion flowing into the Litecoin side. Right now, its market cap is 3.26, right? And you've got folks like Saylor expressing 100 million at Bitcoin and making it. So Litecoin at 40 something, you don't even need big. Habibi could move that. If I was Apple, see, here's the thing, man, you don't want me running one of these companies. No, we would win. And that's Operation Litecoin Liberty, ladies and gentlemen. For Litecoin from a centralized exchange into self-custody. Why? We can impose honesty on that 84 million UTXO base set, and Litecoin touches everywhere, right? Even like Monero, there's virtues. It's UTXO based, but it's got an infinite supply. Granted, its issuance rate tracks Bitcoins, but it doesn't have a supply limit. So you fundamentally lose that quality, but you do have privacy. But they're killing the on and off ramps to fiat. So it's like, great, you guys can have this here. But when with Cardano, value proposition to the 45 billion Cardano guys, because Cardano's future is its infrastructure and its mathematical interoperability. And it also has that it's a sovereign digital asset. So in the same way that Litecoin, and Litecoin is also one of those few assets. There's less than like maybe five true sovereign digital assets. So we know that a currency has three fundamental qualities. One, a mutually agreed upon medium of exchange. Two, a store of value. And three, a unit of account. Sovereign digital assets similarly have three things in common. One, they have a hard cap supply, which imposes the gold condition, supply and demand. Two, a UTXO basis, unspent transaction output, which means it can interoperate with the Bitcoin set, which has more adoption, which is mutually agreed upon medium of exchange, the first fundamental quality of a currency, which is also part of a hard cap supply. So UTXO basis, and then the third, which is that as well. It's what global decentralization and distribution of the validation and consensus mechanisms, and the publicly distributed ledger associated therewith. If you want to hold the current state of Solana, the ledger, you need 600 terabytes. How many people do you know have 600 terabytes, right? Whereas Bitcoin is 1 terabyte, right? Think about this. Whatever the PlayStation 6 is, and shout out to, what's it called? Grand Theft Auto. Shout out to Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, my brain's thinking about things on timescales. Anyway, the Litecoin set. Yeah, guys, honestly, I think Litecoin at $42, anything under 50, anything under 50. I model anything, any Bitcoin that you can get that is under the 69 to 72K level. And any Litecoin under 50 is a heck of a discount. As far as how low it can go, guys, man, so get this. Here's what's interesting. When you look at like a Pepe coin or a Dogecoin or any of these assets, a Bitcoin or a Litecoin, but right? So a spot price that we see is literally just the last executed buy and sell order, which is why we also have to look at the volume environment that is setting these. That's why like weekends, now granted, these markets are like 24/7. We don't see, but once we incorporated institutions with, it was a 48-hour settlement time. Now it's 24. So think about that. When you have huge institutional participation in the Bitcoin set, you can have a major player. Hello, so you joined Pepe Coin Discord. What's your opinion on this coin? It got MiCA regulation. Does it affect Clarity Act? What's up, Bernard? Yeah, man. So we're talking right now about the power of UTXO based interoperability. We're talking about how to exponentiate value creation. We're talking about what are these spot prices determined by? Are we at a discount? I think we're at a discount on the Litecoin set, Pepe Coin. Okay, so get this, guys. If you guys don't know, Litecoin is merge mined with more than like 40 other blockchains. I think that there are three of note that exist right now. One is Pepe Coin, another is Bell's Coin, and then another one, Dogecoin, guys. So like these blockchains are concurrently validated. So when people start thinking, what are you getting when you hold some proportion of Litecoin? And again, at present valuations at $42, for every one Bitcoin, there are 4 Litecoin. So this is why also, again, Litecoin is the only asset that exists that is as well positioned to act as literally the freedom, capital, and liquidity of the people, because it is right now accessible to more people and it's interoperable. So it's like if you got on a plane in Texas, in Austin, and you had a bar of gold, a bar of silver, and you had 1 Bitcoin and 1 Litecoin, and you flew to Sydney, Australia, or Singapore, or Mexico, wherever you go, you'll be able to turn that capital into a hotel room or food a hell of a lot faster with a Bitcoin set and a Litecoin set than your gold or your silver, but the gold and silver will get there too. Whereas like different assets, right? Like you shout out to the Caspa fam, right? And so here's where something like Pepe Coin, right? So Pepe Coin, because it's concurrently merge mined, it has open source arguments. So to answer your question, Bernard, Does this affect Claire? My understanding is like of your question is he's trying to say is in the context of what we know about Clarity Act, is this bullish for something like a Pepe coin? Is it covered? Yeah. Like when you look at under the hood, or at least right, like consult your own whatever, but it's bullish on that. It is bullish. It's bullish on those the decentralized blockchains. That's why when we look at again the fundamental why is Bitcoin and Litecoin different than even Pepe coin, or Monero, or Caspa, or XRP versus Ethereum and Solana. Here, one second. Yeah, just internet's doing shit. But anyway, so you've got multiple Pepe coins, right? You've got one that was started on ETH. Now, shout out to the Ethereum fan. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be my favorite of the accounts-based blockchains, if I was going to pick a pony, man, it's hard. It's between XRP and BNB. You know, because here's the thing, right? I think Solana's ledger is it's chain bloat. It's going to be adopted by a major centralized entity or whatever. XRP is the CBDC that they'll never maybe even admit to, but it's the settlement layer for banks. That is one of the differentiating factors. One of the things though that I like about XRP and one of the things that I like about BNB, they both have hard cap supplies. BNB had a maximum of something like 100, no, it was like maybe 150 million or 200 something million, but it's currently they've burned down to 130 something million BNB with a goal to burn down to about 100 million, which would be roughly a 5-to-1 ratio with Bitcoin. Because you do the whole whatever, there's, how much Bitcoin is actually ever going to be available to the market, probably south of 17 million. You know what I mean? But it's an interesting number. So when you round it down to 20 million is kind of probably a nice little floor for an apples to apples. I like the fact that BNB has a hard cap supply and XRP has 100 billion. So there will only be 100 billion XRP. There's currently 60 something billion in circulation. So they have this big old fat treasury. With Pepe coin, here's what's cool about Pepe coin. A couple things that I really like about Pepe coin. It's a natural liquidity flow. If you're like, hey, I'm on the Ethereum. I have the PEPE versus PEP. This gentleman Bernard is asking about the project that's called PEP. That's the asset that is concurrently merge mined with Litecoin and Dogecoin and Bell's coin, part of that Scrypt mining network, and then a bunch of other ones too. So these not having people out here talking about the power of that is one of the reasons why it's got such a discount. But when you look at something like Litecoin VM, coming, I mean, bro, people that are sleeping on that, dude, they're getting dexes ready. They're getting, man, I saw a stablecoin project coming along. Love to see it. They've got NFTs, man. They're really applying all of what's really been learned on the Ethereum layer, whatever. Da, 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 da. They're holding these open source hackathons where people that have written, smart contracts on some of these other chains. That's one of the other things about BNB. BNB has been a nice little bed of like engineers, like where they'll go there, then they'll build something on Cardano, and they'll go, oh, okay, it's got a cabal issue, it's got a capital expression, and it's got some issues there. But nevertheless, these assets are powerful, and they're made powerful because we can put a check on the migrating from literally just even to Cardano native assets is one way. But when you know that you can go from from like the Cardano set to the Litecoin set, here, one second. Yeah, I'm just getting a thing saying, yeah, man, stop messing with all the flow here, bro. We're peacefully having some educational conversation. Um, but yeah, man. So Pepecoin is part of this Scrypt mining network. Super, super awesome value proposition. So when you look at like the odds and the ease of integration into these decentralized exchanges. So when you look at, okay, once a Litecoin VM DEX goes live, what are the assets that you would use for collateral? Like if I'm going to, okay, right? So here's something that would be great. Here's an example of the power of smart contract expressiveness on UTXO based blockchains. Let's say I wanted to create an algorithmic stablecoin and I wanted to learn from the Terra Luna unwinding, and I wanted to learn about the capital efficiency encumbrance of something like a JED and Shen, which is that's a badass project, man, but it's capitally inefficient. So it starts with a 4-to-1 over collateralization, and then it throws some algorithmic special sauce on there. So it keeps its peg well, but right, if I want to get into lending and borrowing, and I go, okay, it's a freedom stable coin, you can't call it back, you can't stop it, but it's one of the ways that it maintains its peg is we just make sure it's super over collateralized. You know what I mean? So if you give me $1 million worth of, because we're trying to track dollars, you'll be able to mint 250,000 of these JED. So the way that it would typically work is there's a Shen and JED. JED is a word is this like an Egyptian? It's from for stability. Doesn't matter. Point is, so it's over collateralized, whereas a fiat backed stablecoin, capitally efficient. For every $1, put it in the bank account, boom, mint a token. Now you have da 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 da. So how does a Litecoin VM, for instance, create a freedom stablecoin? Right? We've seen these projects being built on Cardano as well with their EUTXO based smart contracts. That's where I would say, if I was going to talk about Litecoin VM relative to Cardano, you know what I mean? You've got just different situations there. It's a different kind of articulation, and a security paradigm, which is not to say that it is not possible to build this right, and that native integration that you get with the Litecoin set really does tether things very, very well. And tether, which is to say, to keep that determinism going. But again, that is that Rubicon that is sort of crossed when you go to that virtual machine model. So, but that's the cool thing is the state of these smart contracts is getting to the point where you could collateralize Pepe coin into a Cardano smart contract and then access all that, and then maybe go into midnight and it'd be like, man, we the pep frogs at midnight, bro. You know what I mean? So like literally, y'all could run through the blockchains. That's what I would do. Like if I was gonna build like a campaign for liquidity migration into Pepe coin, I would say, come back to proof of work. It doesn't mean that you have to leave the Ethereum Pepe project, but like, how cool is that you get to get into the UTXO, then you become a UTXO native asset, because Pepe coin it's a UTXO based asset. So it's really, really it's interesting. So yeah, with Pepe coin, you've got the inflows from the Ethereum layer, which is really, really cool, and even just speculatively, because dude, let's look at their market caps, and this actually this is interesting, you know. Yeah, not all frogs are good, not all frogs are bad. I've been liking the frogs that I've been meeting lately though. And it's like across communities. It's like Solanus. It came to community cannibalism, bro, and that PvP, but they've gone, like we've really done a number on native community. So Pepe with a PEPE so we're going to compare them. It's at 1.1 billion, guys. So that's really interesting. And what's also important to note, it's got a crazy supply of like it was like 420 trillion or whatever when they minted it. So the circulating is 413. So that's why when it says the unlocked market cap versus whatever, so there's actually about 7 trillion that looks like that is not accounted for, but they're saying it's a max supply. So who knows? Maybe they burn 12.2. So it's at 12.2 million. Okay. So or around 11. So it's at 1.1. So there's parity there, but it's like it's what billions versus millions. So it's like it's got a lot of room. So when you look at that too, the Pepe coin, the PEPE, they could moon the F out of this B. you know? So Peppercoin is positioned well to be multiples. And then the other thing, because of that native interoperability, because you validate it concurrently with a Litecoin set. So like if I was a Litecoin VM dev, I'd be like, yeah, like as we set up this DEX, I'm gonna have Peppercoin. So like sticking the landing on that stablecoin based project, right? If you wanted to create a stablecoin that was a freedom stablecoin that had a liquidity pairing with USDC, Tether, whatever, the regulated fiat backed ones, and there's value in that, in arbitraging in having that pair. Shout out to the dexes and the freedom tools and free hearts and free minds, and that's how we put a check on this matrix and the powers that be. And yeah, Elizabeth, please stop messing with our freedom. Because again, this is the only peaceful free market solution that remains to these young folks, man. And really, it's everyone under the age of 40. When people say, oh, why aren't people having babies? It's too expensive. People are having a hard time keeping a roof over their head. Speaking about projects that are shutting down, bro, there's all kinds of, we hear about projects that are shutting down in this space, in the Web3 / whatever space. Because of these markets and these prices and the extraction, guys. That's what's been so sad, dude. They got October 10th. That was a globally coordinated coordinated extraction effort from decentralized. It was messed up. But yeah, man. So Peppercoin is really, really well positioned to do very, very well. And I saw something, it's supported on like Kraken now. So think about that. Mutually agreed upon when we look at the definitions of a currency, what makes that work, but also how do you get that flywheel going? One of the ways, so what's cool is Peppercoin doesn't need these centralized exchanges. It's got that Litecoin layer. We got the the peer-to-peer. So these blockchains are so powerful, but getting the distribution going. A lot of people they log into their Coinbase and they're Kraken just like the FTX. So going back into like this updating dashboards and why we need to be more competitive with the Michael Saylors and the suits, bro. We need to introduce more competition because if they have the last bid, they control the spot price. And that's how they're aggressively acquiring the supply, which is why understanding that you can go, cool, I'm going to take my capital and keep it. Like, for instance, going from the 21 million Bitcoin set, if you think, okay, well, so, Sailors really pumped the Bitcoin bags, let me go ahead and reduce my exposure there. Some of the alternatives that you can do decentralized is to flow from the Bitcoin set to the Litecoin set. And then when you go, okay, like here's another thing, right? Bitcoin at 60, it's over 61, but model it at 60,000. Bitcoin at 60,000 to get a 2x, you know what I mean? To double your money, you're hitting 120K. You're almost at the all-time high. You know what I mean? And so when you look at folks that are, participating in the market, this is what many things the Bitcoin maximalists miss. But there are so many folks that are like trying to turn $5 into freedom. And that's where a Peppercoin comes in. Pepe can hit that multiple, bro. Because okay, so Bitcoin's market cap is 1.1 trillion. I love that, actually. Look at that. Bitcoin is 1.1 trillion, 1.2. Ethereum was 1.1-ish. And then Peppercoin, but billion. And this Peppercoin is about 11.1 million. So you can see on a macro, like how these are flowing. That's actually really satisfying. Whoa, yeah, man. I'm looking at the 3.25 of Litecoin and the 5.86. It's literally, man, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. That's beautiful. And we have some differentiation here when we look at, like, I'm looking at the Solana set. And one of the reasons why is there's a lot more VC money in the Solana set, And again, it has an infinite supply. That's why, like Solana, it's got a lot of backing, from moneyed partners that are like saying, hey, let's kind of sell the sex and the sizzle of blockchain, money in your pocket and the meme coins. But it doesn't have that freedom. It doesn't have the decentralization as like Litecoin does. And because Peppercoin, for instance, with a PEP, that project is concurrently merge mined with Litecoin and Dogecoin. So like they all have each other's back. That's the S-crypt mining network. And there's over 50 of them, but the notable ones are Litecoin, um, Pepecoin, Dogecoin, Bell's Coin, these things. But anyway, shout out to the folks on Cardano, bro. Um, yeah, man. So touching on that, um, yeah, dude, I'm 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 bullish on the fact that founding entities now understand that the community is not going to stand the crazy waste anymore. Like, dude, it is so frustrating. So like, and here's another reason why Litecoin and some of those associated assets, I think more people need to understand about the S-crypt mining network, because then again, if you're a frog of any blockchain, PEP can be your home base because you know, it's the Pepe blockchain. I mean, so it's the one that has a dedicated blockchain. It is its own blockchain, but it's readily interoperable. It's with its UTXO basis, um, with with these other ones. So yeah, when we look at the circulating supply, there's about 102.9 billion Pepe. So what's really cool is the max supply. So it's infinite. It's like Dogecoin, where it has a set block reward basically. So its block reward attenuates till it gets, like Litecoin I think is already more or less at its stasis, but don't quote me on that. Whereas I believe Pepecoin actually does have a halving because it's following like Litecoins or something. They have a white paper. Go check out the website. But yeah. Um but yeah, man. So when I look at these markets, I'm gonna go back to the 24 on the Litecoin side. Yeah, dude, it's 1.86 relative to 3.35. But that's also because one, it's got this gnarly discount, and there's less capital to move the spot price. And the spot price is just the last executed buy or sell order. So for instance, like a meme coin one of the reasons why you can so some of the best marketing right is green candles. I'm not as co-signing meme coins. We're exchanging education and information, talking about how the future of freedom for the people of the world, how we can peacefully decouple our money from state, you know what I mean, so that we can honor our families and create cool shit, own our property, and yeah, get out from under the BS of the folks that are messing up the dollar. It is crazy, guys. National debt. We're gonna be. I think we're already. Well, we are implied over 40 trillion, but we will officially, print whatever before the end of the year. Especially in the context of what's going on in Iran and whatnot, and just aggressions globally. They say it's $1 billion a day, guys, on top of already, all of the different programs and whatnot in the military industrial complex. And, you know, the problems, the things why we're printing so many dollars, and what's messed up. Think about all of the people, that are on fixed incomes from like Social Security that also have to live in this world, and because your property, that's the other thing that's really messed up is we're hearing now in America, folks that don't know, people are becoming distressed in their house, like older people that own their homes, that because the property taxes are inching up, that the value of their homes now, some of these states it's at what you bought it at, and you're in a good spot if that's where you are, but not every state is like that. So if your home is appraised at like 1.1 million dollars or some shit, um but I'm Agatha on Social Security and a pension from 1982 from her husband, Dale, may he rest in peace, you know what I mean. And then meanwhile, the toilet paper is getting crazy. The eggs are all whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know, bro. It's crazy. So a lot of these folks that are getting in distressed situations is because our money's getting outrageous at the dollar level. And if the dollars if the dollar's going, guys, woo-wee, you really want to have a plan where you can, you know what I mean, have like a universal state of economic fair play. So that's one of the things that Satoshi Nakamoto created, with the with Bitcoin. For the first time, the Promethean fire of freedom that Satoshi Nakamoto lit was for the first time everybody in the world, with an internet connection and a smart device could custody the capital that they create, the value that they create in a finite life. And so as people have adopted it and said, hey, okay, I'm going to run this software and I'll validate it. You know what I mean? Like all you're doing is saying, I'll hold a copy of your ledger and I'll keep up with it every 10 to 15 minutes. The block, it's a news saying, hey, here's where all the UTXOs are on all these addresses. And you go, bet, you know what I mean? And there's a whole, what the miners are doing, it's interesting, man, how that works. So for folks that don't know, it's interesting. So first you have to solve a math problem, and then you have to say, here's what I think everything is. And whatever you say has to agree with at least 51% of the network. You know what I mean? And so it's really hard to be a bad actor on Bitcoin at like the validator level. Even though we recently saw 7 blocks were mined consecutively, or was it 9? But let's say 7, because I know it was at least 7 by a single entity. So when you talk about centralization, now granted, this was like a couple months ago, and there's drama going on behind the scenes that are literally the validator set. Some folks are saying, I don't want to run your core software. And we don't like things like ordinals and runes and alkanes. I'm bullish on alkanes. I actually think that's a really cool project. You do your own research, but it's open source software at the end of the day. So when you look at it, it's very expensive. Energy is expensive, so to mine Bitcoin, because here's the other thing, the native reward for mining a block, okay, right? It gets cut in half every 4 years, every so many blocks, which means that if you're buying energy, and what are you doing with that energy, right? Well, you're solving the random math problem, right? You're exerting hash power. And what's really cool is there's something called a difficulty adjustment, where every 18, 21 days, the protocol basically says how many people are trying to crack these math problems, and you read that basically in the hash rate, how much hash is being levied at the network, and then commensurate with that, you can adjust how difficult the random math problems are. So you just add another digit to the kind of math you're doing, right? You know what I mean? And you can make it radically more difficult, as an sort of example. And so that's what's really cool. So even if like it was like, oh look, Bitcoin at like $50,000, it'll be fine. Bitcoin's going to be fine for quite a long time. But even at like $60,000, right? We know that the native reward is what, 3.125 or so, plus transactions, and so that's the other thing. Like you want people using the blockchain, because that is what the validators are doing. So again, like what are the validators doing, right? How does one validate a block? Well, the first thing you have to do is solve the random math problem, which is why they have these things. They're really cute. They're like called solo miners. They do not have a lot of hash power at all. You know what I mean? That's why it's very rare. But it is possible. Shout out to the Ocean Mining Protocol, which allows a bunch of independent, smaller folks to basically pool their hashing power and as a collective entity. And what that does is it allows each participant to more probabilistically participate in the production of a block and participation in the rewards thereof and all this stuff. So it depends on how you choose to levy your hashing power and all this. But at the end of the day, the way that it's built, you know what I mean? But anyway, so if people did shut off their hardware, the protocol will go, how many people are trying to do the math? And if it's like, oh no, China shut itself off, we go, all right, bet. So then for however long until the difficulty adjustment, right? So at maximally, it's a couple of weeks kind of thing, and then the protocol will adjust, and the math gets easier until people start producing blocks faster. These kinds of things. So there's a lot of nuance here. Anyway, so yeah, you solve the random math problem, and then if they go, oh great, you did it. What is the current assignment of the UTXOs at each of the addresses that exists? And you say, it's this. And you go, all right, Everyone else says that. If you had won, is that what you would have said? And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And if 51% say yes, they go, all right, bet, here you go. And then that person gets the block reward, and the block reward entire, there's the subsidy, which is the thing that halves. You started at 50, currently at 3 and change or whatever. But and what people are doing, because to use Bitcoin, you consume Bitcoin. So now shout out, kind of Cardano land / Midnight as well. This is this whole emergent project. One of the things that's a criticism of Charles and the founding entities in the Cardano situation is there's been a lot of just liquidity extraction and use of maybe like Cardano based assets to fund what Midnight is going to be. But one of the really cool things about the Midnight set is one, hard cap supply, 24 billion. It inherits the distribution, the validator set of Cardano. That is a wild value proposition. Well, kind of, because Knight as an asset, Liz is a Cardano native asset, but Knight, you will be able to turn it. You'll be able to have it exist on the Midnight network validator set, which will not be as distributed already. You've got major players. You've got like the Googles and the major players and whatnot that are saying, oh yeah, I'll be a validator for that. Which is, it's got its pluses and minuses, but that's the thing, when you can natively turn it on and off on a network that's unstoppable, and nothing can stop you from saying, I choose to live and express on the Midnight network set. So you have some proportion of the 24 billion Knight, you turn yourself off. You by your command, if you're the custodian of the keys, right? You can turn off the Knight set on the Cardano infrastructure side, and then activate on the a 24 billion, and activate basically a commensurate ability to express your agency, but independently and never concurrently. And that's what's so cool is with UTXOs, you can build this kind of stuff into the blockchains. And then you've got another layer where Knight creates a secondary token called Dust, which is why I chose to say that when you use Bitcoin, you consume Bitcoin. Same thing with Litecoin. Now Litecoin's very cheap. It's like less than a penny. It's like Litecoin is so well done. Shout out to Charlie Lee. But yeah, the engineering of the Litecoin set is really, really, really it's remarkable. And yeah, holding pretty good at 42. Yeah, guys, I think if you're the top blue chips are going to do well. I think even Cardano right now is at a hell of a discount. And that's why, again, shout out to the Cardano collective and whatnot, is the Cardano community is understanding that they need to act in their own interests, because literally you have billionaires that are asking for public treasury to fund their private companies, and people that have a record of bankrupting the multiple companies and shit. That's not smart, dude. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the way, and yeah, and so we realized like we can fund way better projects, and so for instance, like one, again, shout out to the Cardano collective. I think two big primary things, and I wanted to get this, and shout out to the 109 mark. So I'm going to kind of adhere to the Joe Rogan pumpkin principle and say like 1 hour topside. I want to do at least an hour a day. I really want to create for an hour a day, and continue to build, and again, this is very much a crypto-centric episode. Some may lean more this way, that way, the other, who knows, you know what I mean? But I believe in freedom, and that's a relevant conversation every day. And I love it. I love humanity is, man. It's we are the greatest in the shadow and light, bro. Shadow and light is crazy. But I think it's worthwhile. I think it's worthwhile for us because bro, people are not doing okay globally. More people than ever, like in America, are going, what? You know what I mean? Like, basically, if you're not in the top 10% of folks, or you don't, which, your property and assets acquired and whatnot, where your capital is able to be productive and whatnot, there's a reason why folks aren't having children, There's, and when you look at like all of the costs are increasing, dude. Like an education debt. And dude, just the fact that you can't even declare bankruptcy on like your on student loans and shit, which saddles people with just crazy terms. You know what I mean? And then now with AI emerging, you've got so many people losing their jobs, people that have families, that have mortgages, that are going, "Oh my gosh, what do we do?" And so that's the other thing. People have a need, and if they know that there is a way that they can cooperate and exponentiate and literally hold each other's capital and the value. And this is one of the powerful things about when we start talking about Nash equilibrium and scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium, and Nash equilibrium, among many things, is a state in which all players in a game are maximally advantaged, commensurate with their skill level and their available move set. So if everyone's playing chess and everyone knows the game, but they're occupying 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 players are occupying a state of Nash equilibrium, well, then it means that everyone that is playing chess is performing, is ranked commensurate with their real. Ultimately, they would default to skill level because their available move set, we know it resets. And if you do like a classical tournament style, but it's beautiful. Nash equilibrium is it's a beautiful state in many ways. And it's a game theoretical principle, right? And so that's the other power of education, by having more and more people understand fundamentally, okay, what is Bitcoin? So when people, wherever, some guy in a suit and they're going to be at a financial institution saying, well, this is why you should trust this. And right, like, what is it? Why can you? How is it validated? You know what I mean? Like again, if the mining gets too expensive and people start shutting it off, well, now some folks might know. Yeah, shout out to Wolf at N. Yeah, bro. Yeah, man. We are going all over the place. I'm just reading someone in the chat. I don't know again, like how much of the stream, folks can see and whatnot. But yeah, bro, shout out to you. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, man, so many pieces. But anyway, oh yeah. So that's why, dude. Why to spend time? Why does this make sense? One, right? Got to be our own solution, and never before has humanity. There is no other asset that is going to allow people to escape. You know what I mean? Because otherwise you're going to be CBDC land with a, you know, I mean, how many people even have cash? How many people, most deposits are in banks and brokerages, you know? And so more and more things become digital, and yeah, and so it's going to be important for these pretty much everyone globally. How are we going to keep people healthy financially and free markets? Because that's the other thing. If you reduce the number of participants in a market, you also reduce gosh, dude, you reduce a lot of shit. The production possibility frontier curve for one, which has to do with like capital expressive. How productive are you with the capital you have, and you can assign your capital goods. Anyway, so yeah, and that's interesting because Larry Fink was mentioning that we need more medium and small size businesses and whatnot winning, because we are not, it's not good. It's really not good. In the way in which Henry Ford understood that the people that build the cars have to be able to afford the cars, because then that Henry Ford worker who's well paid, he's got a wage for building those cars, and then he gets in that car and he goes over to the butcher shop, and then he's going in there. Oh, hey Sam, give me da 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 how many ever steaks, right? I'm gonna, me and the wife and the kids it's Saturday night, right? Um, and the butcher goes, hey bro, that's a dope ass car, da 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 da, and then suddenly, right? Think about this: the guy that's working at Ford is making a living wage. He can afford a car, which is his own, like market. People say, da, 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 and he can afford that steak. And then he drives that car to that steakhouse, which now means that the guy that's selling the steak, the local butcher shop, is doing better because Henry Ford's boys can afford a steak, for the family. And then suddenly the guy that's having the steaks going, oh my gosh, I have more. I'm doing better because Henry Ford opened up a plant. In modern days, right? Maybe it's a Tesla kind of situation or whatever. Some, shout out to any, business in America or the world, any entrepreneur, starting a business. Um, and it starts creating these flywheels of productivity. um and so that's where when you start going blood from a stone, and you start returning more and more and more of the capital or the value that is created from the capital expression, be the people and employee inputs, all the various inputs, and you're returning it to shareholders, and it's at the expense of those people throwing themselves into suicide nets at Foxconn in Taiwan and or China. You know what I mean? There's a lot. There's a lot. You know what I mean, with the state of the modern economy, because it is not so like the average person. Like when you hear that folks that work at places like Amazon and Walmart, when a lot of these people are on like food stamps, you know, it's like, bro, what? You can't have these full-time employees needing public assistance if they're working full-time, like in America, bro. Like that's fucked up, it shouldn't be so, you know and that's where, like, Jeff Bezos recently came out and said, yeah, if you make less than some number, you shouldn't pay taxes, and I agree. you know I think around 50,000. Why? Because I think about 25 is 52 is a great little kind of mnemonic device, or rather, it's a pattern that's, because $25 an hour at 40 hours a week, full time, so $52,000 a year before taxes. So that gives you a sense of, okay, well, what is, whereas, man, when you do the math on like 725, I forget, man, that's crazy. It's like 14,000, 15,000. It's something crazy when you look at federal minimum full time, and you go, oh my gosh, right? Because the average like rent on an apartment in so many major cities is like the majority of what someone working at federal minimum would make. So when you look at that, like how decoupled from the people that build the cars should be able to afford the cars are also a stand-in for the lifestyle of the average American at the time. And so that's one of the cool things about a lot of the AI and blockchain and all of these conversations, having about like what is the value proposition and the power of the Bitcoin set and the Litecoin set and things like Pepe Coin and Dogecoin and Cardano and Midnight. And then you extend that as well with the grand unified UTX of the, and you say, oh, the Monero set and the Zcash set and the Bitcoin Cash set, you know, um, and Caspa, you know what I mean? All of these UTXO based assets. So you keep those networks open to innovation. You know what I mean? Who knows what kind of cool, projects and assets and things, are going to be able to be possible, and when you have that interconnected interoperability, you can store maybe that longer money in that Bitcoin set. You go, you know what? I'm going to put that there and I'm going to collateralize it. Maybe again, Litecoin VM launches and they've got some really cool DeFi protocol. Again, I'm a big fan of UTXO based DeFi. That's where I think Cardano really can win so much. Cardano and Midnight really, I think, have just such a huge advantage because of that UTXO based interoperability, but again, Litecoin VM, something that like Ethereum doesn't have and Solana doesn't have, is that the Litecoin VM, by being built on a layer that has the qualities of a Litecoin, is radically different than what can be built even with a virtual machine. So I am bullish. I'm very bullish on what Litecoin VM is going to do, and bullish on where Litecoin is positioned in the market, and especially at like, $42 a Bitcoin, a Litecoin rather, because again, I think Litecoin's real value, true value, is like 50. And fair value is beyond that, and honestly, even true value, that's actually a misnomer. I rescind that, just by my definition of those things. But I would say the diamond floor of Litecoin, so to speak, is closer to that 50, but we're looking at it at 42. But similar with Bitcoin at 69 and 72, 73,000. I think Bitcoin right now is institutional players using their advantage, you know, and institutional leverage, and the market is spooked because the spot price is determined by the last executed buy and sell order. So if the market stops bidding, and then you've only got a couple players, and they're well-heeled capital players, that's how like a 32 Bitcoin sale can. You just got to clear the liquidity available in the books. It's really dastardly. And then if you let panic people be the last executed buy and sell order, you know what I mean? It gets wild. It gets wild. And then those well capital, if you're sitting on over 500 million, right? Like the strategy is sitting on 800, over 800,000 Bitcoin of a 21 million total, 20 million of them, in circulation. It's crazy, dude. It's crazy. Or yeah, it's dastardly work. But this is pre Clarity Act, and that's really what I think we're gonna very likely see is I think the SpaceX IPO, and that's another thing. That's why peace, bro, peace, because even something like a SpaceX IPO, man, it's not going to do as well as it otherwise could. I think in an environment that has more man, like they say, markets abhor uncertainty. You know what I mean? So just yeah, more stability, more certain, more kindness. You know what I mean? When the world knows that the powers that be that are in charge of the military apparatus, you know what I mean, in the U.S. and certainly abroad, they're not acting in the best interests of the people of the world. You know what I mean? Even in those their respective countries. I don't think leadership in America is honoring the average American in any effing way. It's so bad for most people under 40 in America. It's bad. It's real bad, you know? Um, and when you look at the instability, like if I was a citizen man, like people in Israel, bro, you know what I mean? Like creating an environment where people are like justifiably pissed off at your leaders, you know? And I say, and it's so important to remember that like the people of a nation are not the leaders, right? Like we can't hold the average American, responsible for the ineptitude of a president, his people, whatever, which is why like in a time where we're seeing far too much like racists and like xenophobe, just hateful shit that is so destructive to everything, to like good food, safe, communities, you know. When you have people that are in want, it's a problem, you know. And Jesus, man, right? I'm not. You don't got to be a Christian. I don't care, who taught you how to love your fellow man, kind of thing, whatever wisdom tradition, There's a lot of beauty in a lot of those books, but yeah, man, we're not honoring the power of what we are. You know what I mean? Like again, when you look at like a SpaceX, like one of the things, and I've said this is one of the things that I really want to see before we, you know, before I go, um, is like a real attempt at like a mission to Mars would be wild. Now I think we're going to see the moon really, really soon. So shout out to again what SpaceX is going to do, but I love the fact, that a manned mission to Mars will mean that our persistence as a species on this planet is a matter of our collective choice and our will, not our engineering capability. Because to be able to really actually do Mars, man, we got to be masters of energy production, energy storage, master orbit, and SpaceX, is again, it's just, and then when you look at Tesla, right? Tesla's been, energy storage piece. They acquired photovoltaics companies, whatnot. Shout out to Westinghouse modular nuclear, energy production. You know, I mean, it's so exciting. You know, the possibilities and the technologies that are emerging. Um, but we definitely got to honor it, and we can fumble it. We definitely can. And like, I think we're seeing that from our leadership. You know what I mean? Whether it's like say the president being, belligerent and antagonistic to folks, or creating an environment that's more permissive to hate or whatever, or it's these political apparatus that are all owned by the same folks. A lot of banks, bro, a lot of money, man. Follow the money, dude. You know? Um, yeah. And with all of those things, that is why, that is, I think, such a fundamental piece of the necessary conversation when we're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about Litecoin, we're talking about cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies, and I know there's people that go, no, 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 no. Bitcoin, for instance, is 7 transactions per second. Visa demands 40,000 plus transactions per second, you know? So there's just fundamental, right? Like, and Lightning Network is a custodial secondary L2. You know what I mean? So again, there's folks that want to come at something from a very closed-minded space. Are they being ignorant? The reality is interoperability is what allows one to maintain custody, but also have like really limitless capital expression to, commensurate with, limited only by your ability to create in that sound market, with a sound asset. And that, again, is one of the powerful things that Bitcoin does, is as people, and what's cool is we're seeing it from nation state level. We're seeing large, private enterprises and businesses. We're seeing folks, again, incorporating Bitcoin into real estate deals. That money it moves a lot slower. So as a base asset layer, if you're conversant in those assets and about, wow, you can access lending and borrowing and whatnot. That's, again, I think one of the value propositions of something like a Zcash that's developing is, these platinum collateral projects where, again, the asset is priced at the last executed buy or sell order. You've got, folks like the Winklevoss twins own an exchange, Gemini, which gives you that place to set the market, make the market. Zcash is all over the place. Sure, there's this recent Orchard leak and whatnot. But at the end of the day, there are the network will reach consensus and move forward. And there are already addressable. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to move from one pool to another, knowing that they're going to have a confined, sort of a confined vessel. And so what's also cool is they'll be able to more or less get a sense of the magnitude of the use of any associated exploit. I think, again, for folks that are even aware of what I'm talking about, it's about an exploit that was found with an artificial intelligence related to the Zcash, and what's interesting, Litecoin, actually, someone found an MWeb exploit, and similar. The only thing that was really at risk was the depth of a local liquidity pool, and man, that was just such an awesome response from just the whole team involved on that Litecoin side. The Zcash, whatever, I think it just got a lot more press. It also doesn't have the advantages of what the MWeb extension blocks have. There's better, more deterministic math on the MWeb set. So, but yeah, man, I think Zcash is going to be fine. I think that it will end up being a really effective, if nothing else, platinum collateral. That's how I would start marketing it. Because what you want chiefly in a collateralizable asset is it to retain its value or grow. And if the market is made at the last executed buy or sell order, and you have this 21 million unit set, that is how Zcash and Monero have been able to differentiate themselves in the market, like in these last couple of years, is you've got a coordinated holder base that knows what time it is, so to speak, and so they're acting in unity. They're not introducing supply to the market. And so if every Zcash holder is like, bet, will get loud. And when you have Winklevi level with Gemini with an exchange, there's a lot of ways you can get that cooking, so Zcash will be back. But yeah, man, I think for like a Cardano and whatnot, and just all of these assets, they become stronger when you realize, oh my gosh, we can use these. So again, like these stable coins, right? Like Freedom stable coins in liquidity pools with regulated, like the circles and the tethers and whatnot. The problem with a circle and a tether is that you can freeze it, you get clawbacks, you get all these things, you know what I mean? Whereas a freedom stable, like something like a JED, that's freedom stable. USDCX, is more or less is a freedom stable. Like you can't stop that. Um, and what's cool is more and more of these interoperability regimes and highways and byways and protocols exist. So we're even looking at, shout out to the Silent Swap team, shout out to the Leodex team, shout out to the Houdini Swap team, shout out to Thorchain. Thorchain has been under, man, with these AI bots, bro. Like Thorchain has recently been hit with a couple different, whatever, but they keep on pressing on. And folks are sleeping on Maya Protocol. Maya Protocol had like a shared, basically, like code base, in many ways with with Thorchain. And they said, you know what, there are some different, things we kind of want to look at. So they created their own sort of situation there. So shout out to Maya Protocol. But what's really cool is they've got, it's so cool how this exists on like the DeFi side as well as it exists on, like amongst those L1s, like UTXO based L1 blockchains, like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Monero, Zcash, Bitcoin Cash, Caspa, and you realize, oh my gosh, Dogecoin, that you're going to be able to flow value between them and then use those assets in smart contracts to borrow against. And also, in many tax jurisdictions, consult your local one, borrowing against assets is a non-taxable event. That's how wealthy people in America, like this SpaceX IPO. Could you imagine you get in on the SpaceX IPO? And I would not, man, if you do not have exposure, man, just let's wait till it's trading. You know what I mean? And good luck. Some people are going to make a lot of money. Some folks are going to lose a lot of money. But folks that don't liquidate those shares, but like say borrow against them and then roll that into like a Bitcoin when Clarity Act passes, because I think that is what's going to happen with a lot of the macro flows is the Nancy Pelosi, the Martha Pelosi cook, right? No relation to Nancy Pelosi or Martha Stewart. But it's, yeah, I mean, I think that they're going to book those multiples. They're going to make that money, with these IPOs that are going to do great, and then that money's going to rotate back to blockchain. You know what I mean? Because that's also the native monetization layer for artificial intelligence. These agentic bots are going to be using Bitcoin and Litecoin and Monero and Zcash and Cardano and Midnight. And then again, that night dust in the mix. So that's another cool thing with this Midnight thing. So while it's irritating for a lot of Cardano holders, that ADA, is that a lot of their liquidity is flowing into this Midnight project. And it's like, bro, like this treasury wasn't meant for that, So that's also why having a unified vision and approach, because we've seen that the powers that be in Cardano, Charles and the founding entities and Fred and whatnot, and Emergo, whatever the heck they do with their billions, that is so sad. They were given like more than 2 billion ADA. And for folks that don't know, for the last more than 5 years, because Cardano wasn't live, it's like 8 or 9 years old, but for the first 2 years, there was no really blockchain. So comfortably just rounding for the 5 years, imagine you have, 2 billion ADA that is generating native yield every 5 days paid directly to you, and when you're talking about billions of ADA, these founding entities have had like millions of dollars, like between 20 and 40 million, depending on like what ADA is trading at. And that's a conservative number. And when you look at the way that you can also have that compound, because then you have your 2 billion ADA generating ADA, which is stacking ADA. So then 2 billion plus ADA yields more ADA. Now, granted, the staking, it's the whole thing. Only 45 billion ADA though. So there's that. And so that's another thing is the staking rewards are diminishing over time, and so we're seeing this kind of a reset of a kind with this night set, and it's done a disservice to the Cardano set. And unfortunately, the same thing that like has proves that they're not good businessmen. It's we see in the way that they're doing this Midnight rollout. It's atrocious. Like the Cardano blockchain and all the associated entities and the price performance of ADA as an asset only did about 10% of what it could have done. Cardano should have been challenging for 7 ADA, should have been the target at the during, between 7 and 10 with an irrationally exuberant, but 5 to 7 should have been in the wheelhouse. We should have been accumulating between 2 and 5 comfortably. But there was so much thoughtless just hemorrhaging, bro. Yeah, amen, Wolford. And yeah, they're scientists, not businessmen. Exactly, And these are good people, not trying to whatever. But that's the thing is they're quietly off in the middle of Scandinavia or whatever. And some of these folks are making like 350, $450,000, guys. And there's more than 100 of these folks, and they don't pay their rent in Ada. So what's happened is it's not that Ada hasn't made money, guys. It's that Charles and these founding entities and whatnot have these employees, and so they sell 250,000 Ada for that one employee, and that sales pressure is borne by man. We poor out here, bro. That's another reason why we're out here, man. Is on the macro, we really do have to be our own solution. But there are many members in the community that have been literally laid off in their real life jobs. I've got a friend, I've got many. I know a lot of folks across all these blockchains, but people just aren't doing well, man. They're not doing well. So we got to do better. You know what I mean? So yeah, at the very least, holding these founding entities accountable. It's like, guys, you have billions of dollars and all the advantage. If you cannot make billions of assets be productive enough to pay your bills, you're not the one at this point because you've had years and years of crazy runway, crazy built-in revenue. Think about that. These founding entities have had built in the every 5-day payout. Like that's such a wild advantage, and it's beautiful and powerful, but so squandered, and it's just been bad, guys. You know what I mean? Whereas had they like hired the young, scrappy people, be like, bro, right? Like we want to make sure that you've got like health, you're like that you're safe and okay, but we need you in the young and hungry. You're a champion coming up. Like we need to make an edifice that cannot be stopped. Like and what they did is because they had privilege and plenty and they had all the perks and whatnot, it didn't hurt them to just and then you have the like Dreyfus, whatever the hell it is, where your task will expand to fill the available time. So we have something like Laos, bro, and without putting a date on the calendar saying we're delivering here, these engineers, could you imagine if you were making between 250 and 450,000, say 375,000 plus benefits, travel, all this cool shit. And yeah, like the community wants Laos, so you're kind of have got the community beholden to you, and you've got folks like Charles that have created an environment where it is only about him, dude. It's not a coincidence that he had that rah video. I haven't seen it. I'm glad to hear that he's positive, but to me, it's because of things like the Cardano Collective that's popping up now. Them realizing we cannot be beholden to these people anymore, which is why please join the Discord, man. Let's go. I believe in Cardano. I believe that the people of Cardano can make something better of it. There's a better long-term vision, the grand unified UTXO theory, how oppressed people escape. That alone, having Cardano be that smart contract layer for the UTXO set, that kind of shit. And I think, again, Monero and Zcash, that is such a power. And when you add like Litecoin, oh my God, and then like something like a Pepe coin with that narrative of migrating flow from the Pepe PEPE to PEP, going from proof of stake Ethereum to its own native blockchain. And that's another thing. Like it's a meme coin that is its own blockchain, So like shout out to like Snek, for instance, which is like the leading meme coin on Cardano. But that is in its own blockchain, you know what I mean? But it is its own asset and it's really cool. So it's like it's got a lot of that. But there is something very cool that the frogs have their own blockchain. And I like that it's concurrently merge mined with Litecoin, in the S-Crypt mining network. It's just so cool. And realizing, whoa, and shout out to Ergo. Ergo, unlike Cardano that moved to Ouroboros proof of stake, Ergo stayed proof of work. They just kind of like what Charlie Lee did. They're like, hey, let's get even more efficient with this proof of work sort of mechanism here. And Ergo, not a lot of folks know this. They've open sourced ways where you can use Dogecoin in Cardano smart contracts. You know what I mean? And so like things like Pepe are going to be able to go, oh shit, yeah. Or PEP rather, PEP is the ticker for that S-Crypt merge mined one. And again, not financial advice. We're just, having this conversation and folks are asking about it in the chat and whatnot. But yeah, dude, so it's powerful. And I think what these founding entities need to know, and I think one of the powerful positions that the Cardano community is in is letting Charles know that the Cardano community drives the success of Midnight. And I think that is going to be key. That the way forward for Cardano is going to be competing on all fronts. Have this emergent fourth entity that is pool operators. So stake pools get access to uh yeah, sorry, it's just say, connection stuff. Da 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 da. But yeah, so I'll wait till the connection gets studied again. But this is important because these are two really cool things. But anyway, um, yeah, so stake pools, right? So we want to get a unified network of stake pool operators that are like, yeah, bro, running infrastructure, trying to do my best here, participating, but feeling a little effed over by the powers that be. And I would love to be able to unify and make the ADA that I'm generating more capital expressive and yield more. And it's like, bet, because that's what we could do. You know what I mean? So like we just set goals like, yeah, let's get 10 SPOs fully saturated. And that's another thing is these collectives could have access to advertising, people saying, hey, yeah, there's this stake pool that exists. They're part of the Cardano Collective Freedom Network, this emergent fourth entity, an entity of the people of Cardano. And so not only do we want to get that SPO network, we want to get a DREP network and roster, so that we can say, hey, yeah, like saturate the 300 pool, amen, right? Like there's folks out here that are building. So these are the kind. And yeah, because a lot of these folks also, and this is where like the Cardano Keeps project is really powerful. So it's a gamified SPO. It's a game that incentivizes people to migrate their delegation, and because you need a certain amount of delegation for your stake pool to likely participate in the validation of a block in the Cardano mainnet, so you get a reward for it. So the way that you do that in a proof of stake is you need to get people that own it in the free market to say, oh, I believe in you, or like for this instance, the 300 pool, and so you could go, okay, cool, like what's the stake pool thing? And they say, oh yeah, it's this is the ticker, and you go, okay, bet. And for folks that don't know how Cardano works, you have ADA, right? So there's only 45 billion ADA that will ever exist. There's right now there's 36.23 billion of the 45 that is currently circulating. So that's kind of dope. So a stake pool is also like maximally saturated because you don't want to concentrate either. You don't want to have all of it go to one thing. So they hit it's around 60 million. It's like between 60 and 65 million ADA per stake pool. If you go over that, your probability drops. So it's actually really elegant. You need to have a minimum number likely to mint a block, and then you go, ooh, too much. So you want it to be around that 60 million ADA. So that is going to regularly generate blocks. So we basically create a game where we have every 6 epochs it resets, and we launch with like 21, let's say, in honor of like, the 21 million or whatever, it could be 7, could be 21, doesn't matter. But each of these would be like a castle keep. A keep in a castle was like the last redoubt of the king. Even if a castle was overrun, it's like the castle in the castle. And so if we create a game, like it's like there's villagers and then there's zombies, right? And so you have people elect in with like an NFT, and it resets. You basically, with that NFT, you can say, oh shit, am I a zombie or am I a villager? Okay, and it resets, let's say every 6 epochs, so that's 30 days. And let's say 10% of people are zombies, right? And so if you're a villager, then whatever wallet has that NFT with your villager, your associated ADA is like the power you have for a keep, like raising the defenses, right? So if you go, oh gosh, I'm a villager, you delegate your stake, your ADA, to a stake pool, which is like in the game, it's like a castle or the keep of the castle. I like Cardano keeps. You can also do Cardano castles. That works as well. But I like Cardano keep because there's all the metaphor. But anyway, so castles and keeps on Cardano, it's cool. So there's these things that they're not being supported. So yeah, when we talk about these people are engineers, not businessmen, freaking obviously, bro. Because that shit would cook. What I just said right now, man, you go to CardanoKeeps.io, don't go there. It doesn't exist yet, but it's these kinds of things. And then look at that. Look what that does for like, what if this, I don't know the 300 pool people, right? So do your own research and whatnot, but they're here, they're supporting. Shout out to Wolf Hood. But yeah, what if they're like, yo, I like Cardano, I'm a new SPO, but I'm not charismatic. I don't like to talk. I don't like to whatever, because that's the other thing and that's part of the issue that we're running into with governance on Cardano, is that the founding entities delegated to the stake pool. And so the people that are able to mint blocks and participate in the network are kind of beholden to a lot of these people as well. So it's all messed up, guys. It's all messed up. So having these gamified things where a brand new person can go, yo, cool, 6 epoch period. So now you gamify a reason to get, say, like in the game, I would say you're like, imagine like the villagers run into your keep. Again, the connection's being stupid again. But and yeah, we're coming up on about an hour 45, guys. I want to go about like anywhere between 1 and 3 hours, kind of maximum, you know. But yeah, so we'll see. Um, but yeah, Cardano keeps. So yeah. So it's basically like, imagine like you want to have a million ADA, right? So like in the on the Cardano blockchain, it means that stake pool is likely to mint a block. You know what I mean? In the game, it means you had enough villagers rally to like build like a wooden fence, you know, where they lower the portcullis. And so as the stake pools saturate, the Cardano keeps with villagers trying to survive the zombies, the defense ratings go up, but zombies convert, villagers. 36 billion, 21 billion stakes. There's a lot to stake of stake to get out there. Oh wow, thank you for that stat, Wolfenden. I didn't know that. Yeah, so there's I guess 36 billion Cardano of the 45 billion maximum, but 36 billion currently in circulation and only 21 billion. Shout out to 21. Love it, 21 million Satoshi. Shout out Satoshi. There's a lot of stake to get out there. Yeah, education and the conversations is important. And so that's the other thing about like media cooperative things like this, by having people that aren't paid, and again, shout out to all the regular faces and whatnot, but a lot of those folks have had participation, in the cornucopias and the melds and the whatnot. And bro, there's an unfortunate situation. I'm not out here trying to throw stones at people and whatever, but yeah, there's an unfortunate someone that used to create content that was pretty good, that apparently was like like just had everything, and they chose to. It's just sad. It's sad. So anyway, so it's important to get these networks going, but yeah, so things like Cardano keeps is a fun way where it's a way where users. Oh, and here's the other thing, right? It's a winner take all. So it's like, so basically the zombies convert the villagers, and then each stake pool by stake pool, there will be a global hub so you can see the live saturation. So people would be migrating their stake to the different whatever, to hit the defense levels. And then basically, if there's more zombies inside that stake pool associated with the ADA than villager, so you'd have like basically a zombie ADA and villager ADA, because again, it's just whatever wallet that NFT is that registers to play the game, that a villager, and that's every 6 epochs it resets to start with about 10%. Is just kind of back of the envelope, whatever. And then yeah, so depending on like the saturation of the stake pool, so let's say you've got a stake pool and they need 1 million to get the portcullis up or whatever. And so there's like currently live 670,000 ADA, and they need 1 million for the first defense level, right? And there's 200,000 ADA worth of zombie ADA, right? So that's just maybe there's 40 or 50 different players that each have different wallets with different values of ADA, and 90% of them have villagers when they look at their wallets. So they're like, oh shit, okay. So, and at the global hub, and it's interesting because that's how you could build the game, is you see how much information do they see. I think it would be interesting to roll it out is until one of the Cardano keeps is saturated, they don't even get to see, or maybe they do get to see so that they at least have one place to defend themselves. There's all kinds of really cool shit you could build. But anyway, so yeah, so it's a way to have brand new SPOs that don't want to do a bunch of marketing and whatnot get automatic saturation. Because like, yeah, bro, you're one of the Cardano keeps. Where can actually have like, you can give them special like perks that they can give their delegates, and which allows that stake pool to have persistent delegation, even if they're not one of the 21 Cardano keeps the next 6 epoch, right? Because that might be one way to build it, and so we could either every epoch expand the number possible, we can limit. Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to build it, but really excited about that project. There's Midnight Galleries. That's a whole cool NFT Renaissance project. So thinking about all of the cross chain and collaboration potential, where when we work together, we can make Knight successful and Ada successful. And Charles, I think he needs to know that we have him by the balls with Knight, basically, because the Cardano community can, they're really going to set the tone and the narrative. That's the unfortunate thing about them, like starving it and killing it and having everyone go. As if now you notice how many of these like midnight ambassadors, it's yeah, it's a whole thing, but it matters. You can't have the ADA holders be super upset at Chuck and whatnot. And what's powerful is if they understand, like, yo, we start competing for the night as well, but on the ADA side. And so that's why when we have a network of SPOs and DREPs, right? Because then with the DREPs, we can start supporting good projects, right? If there's necessary smart contract building or infrastructure upgrades, boom, let's fund it, But let's also make sure we have enough representation in the governance that we can make that impact too, And that's why it's so sad where, okay, so Charles loses control of the founding entities. So now he's like, oh, should I become my own DREP? Because his bags are so fat that he can basically just stuff the ballot wallet. If you're an ADA holder, so it's just like if you keep your value in the dollars, you know what I mean? You are beholden to the ineptitude of the powers that be, the Federal Reserve, those that run the printer. If you're denominating your value in ADA, we've largely been beholden to the ineptitude of Charles and the founding entities. And these folks that are just, hiring all these people, we're paying all their salaries with ADA sales pressure. And so that kind of stuff has to stop. And so by one of the checks on the power is by educating the community to say, yo, Cardano can set the power of and the performance of Midnight and ADA. And with stablecoins now, we can start, because that's the other thing, man. When you look at the reality why Cardano hasn't had a stablecoin, it's because it's kept the value flowing into basically the current founding entities' pockets. If you have an app that's really cooking, like shout out to Strike Perpetuals, bro. Like they're such a bright light. Like they're just doing awesome work. So shout out to Shan and the Strike Perpetuals team. And it's like C-Swap is also a really great team, but the Strike Perpetuals team is just knocking it out of the park. They basically have the most volume. They're moving the most volume. Yeah, man. Amen, dude. Strike is incredible. Like, yeah, if you're an ADA holder, get conversant in like understanding you can stake Strike tokens. You don't have to do anything. You're basically helping their liquidity environment be favorable. They're a Perpetuals platform. They're getting folks access to all kinds of shit. Like Nvidia just went live. I saw something on the timeline. They went live with some other thing. They've got like Ethereum. They're doing just such great work. And that's powerful. So like with the Strike tokens, you can acquire Strike, stake Strike, and then you just get, a cut of people using the platform. It's really cool. It's basically like Cardano's Hyperliquid on chain. You know what I mean? So that's dope. And so it's things like that. There's no one out here having that conversation, with regularity and whatnot. And that's important. And that's value creation. You know what I mean? And so with the Cardano Collective, if we've got a bunch of, SPO operators that are running the infrastructure, we're teaching them again. Could you imagine we get these SPOs, get a network of SPOs, like set a goal of, let's say, and again, just any goal will do, but you don't want to be 1,000. We want things to celebrate together. Which is another reason for the Cardano Collective is to create a unified vision and a plan. It's like Litecoin, right? They obviously putting into their objectives to hit, like, first of all, reclaiming the $50 diamond floor. That's big, but like 69 and then 100 is right. So those are kind of built in like, hey, right. But then 420, the actual all-time high for Litecoin is like 384 or something. Let me see. Does it have it all-time high? Whatever, doesn't matter. It's around like 386 or something. But 420, right? So just having shared things like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to 50, and then we're gonna go to 69, then we're gonna go to 100, then we're gonna get to 420, then we're getting 1,000, and then we're gonna, oh my gosh, like then we've done something special. Things like that are so powerful for communities that keeps them acting in unity, and that gives them something to go, hold on, let them cook. You know what I mean? So it's powerful. So shout out to Strike, dude. Shout out to Strike. But yeah, man. So we get these DREPs a place where they can cooperate, collaborate, and whatnot. The Discord right now is one of those spots. Well, that right now that is the spot for the Cardano Collective, I suppose. But we'll keep building it. I think there's power in keeping it simple. Um, but yeah, having folks have that place that isn't some membership fee, intersect, catalyst, da da da, something that Chuck pays for is really how that lands, you know. And that's why, like, you're not going to have those conflicts of interests, you know. And again, and then when you peel back those layers and you realize, oh, we've been paying your salary for the last how many years? You know what I mean? So what are the odds that they're going to be saying, things contrary to Chuck and whatnot, which is why a lot of these places are ghost towns, because everyone that shows up now is on payroll. You know what I mean? So there's a lot there, but I'm encouraged because people have pushed back. That's why for folks that are outside of Cardano, they may view the Cardano summit not being approved as a negative, but I think Cardano natives should view that as a huge positive, because that is one of the things that started the pushback where, Chuck was like, oh, fucking diddly, and all that, um but because yeah, now granted, Charles doesn't really care that the Cardano foundations didn't get founded, but there was even pushback on his big ask for another whatever. And that's the other thing, man, is repeating the same mistakes that we see in politics around the world and like in the US, where it's like these monolithic bills where you'll have like a bill and it's like $700 billion at midnight, right? And then somehow the bill goes from 700 billion to like 1.2 trillion in just 4 hours, from like 9 p.m. or whatever to like 3 a.m., right? And then everyone votes and it passes. And it's like, oh, we passed the bill, but it's like this $1 trillion monster. And the reason that it's so bloated is so that you can't pick out and point at any one inefficiency. You can't go, oh, Becky, we don't need 32 million for the foot warmers in Brazil or whatever, and so like we see Charles and these founding entities doing the same shit. They have all of this advantage, all this capital, all this first mover on the blockchain, just an extraction, and then they're going to say, oh, but also pay me more. It's just it's just so bad, guys. But yeah, but so that's the thing, is the people are going, no, they're pushing back. So this is good. This is good. Um, but yeah, man, at like Cardano ADA under 20 cents, that's but remember, Bitcoin's at 61K, and a Bitcoin under 69 to 72, 73K is bullshit. That's leveraged, positioning. And that's the market can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent, kind of thing. So yeah, I wouldn't trip. Again, I think we have these major, and actually with what we're seeing, out of like Cynthia Lummis is one of the folks that will she'll throw some tea out there. And she is pushing forward with trying to get clarity passed. Now, granted, and shout out to Wendy O for I like her coverage of clarity, by calling it what it is, which is it's a banker's bill. It's not necessarily good for crypto natives, but it doesn't mean that the prices won't perform. It's just there's ridiculousness in it. Like there's anti-competitive shit from banks. Banks should have to compete in a free market, and if DeFi protocols and solutions offer people better returns and better expressiveness and better capability, then why shouldn't they be able to readily access things like stablecoin liquidity and all these and yield on these things? And it's madness. And the reason why is because fractional reserve banking, right? So like if someone puts $100,000 in their local bank, that bank then can lend out more than $1 million in credit issuance. And their personal, the home, like the personal credit division, those interest rates are over 20% on average. So it's just there's this whole double messed up set of rules. Whereas in DeFi, just because you're participating in DeFi, they don't get to do a 10 for 1 for every I mean, it's a whole different set of rules. And so what we've seen with Clarity Act and the powers that be, they've been spending a lot of money to encumber DeFi and to limit, so that they don't have competition. But here's the thing: understanding the power of these networks, you can serve both. Because get this, if banks have healthy competition for the deposits, right? If deposits in banks increases inflation by virtue of extensions of credit, right? And one of the reasons we aren't cutting interest rates at the federal level is because we're issuing too many dollars. That's a good thing. So if we reduce deposits by, let's say, 10%, it'd be way less than that initially, but let's say 10% because people are seeking an alternative. Well, that is now your auspice to cut federal interest rates because it'll be less on deposit because you're giving an alternative with DeFi. So we can win everywhere. We can inspire flows in traditional markets and we can encourage new innovation in DeFi that ultimately builds a sounder system anyway that's more maximally productive. I mean, it's madness that these boomers are running the ship. These greedy MFing boomers that have like again, and they all get rich too. Like they don't have term limits. You know what I mean? Like someone like Dianne Feinstein of California was in there for I don't even know how long. I mean, she just retired, but she was in there for a minute. You got Nancy Pelosi's been in there a minute. Chuck Schumer's been in there for damn near 50 years. Mitch McConnell's been in there for forever. You know, it's crazy, guys. And they're all rich, you know, and they don't know these technologies. They have no idea what differentiates Bitcoin and Litecoin and Cardano from BNB and XRP and Solana and Ethereum, you know, and how they might work, you know, and what an NFT really is and all this shit, you know. And yet they're the ones that are writing these laws, you know. And then meanwhile, we've also got artificial intelligence happening. It's crazy, guys. It's crazy. But yeah, you know, and so that's another reason why it's important to empower these networks, you know, to have better conversations about what Bitcoin is and how we can make Bitcoin more powerful and how we can not have this damn influence on the spot price, you know. Now, granted, this is when you have a crazy president, you know. This is mostly oil and war, unfortunately, you know. And there's a reason why Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex. Man, folks don't know, you know, Eisenhower was a former president, Republican president, and a four-star general, you know, with like the World War II and Korean War era. And in his last public like address to the people is when he coined the term and when he said, "Beware the military-industrial complex," because he was privy to witness the productive output of like what happened when World War II and then the Korean War and how much that can start greasing palms and whatnot. But then suddenly when the war making, when murder, when discord, disharmony, you know, when that becomes what pays you, you know, it becomes not a freedom maximizing, not the most positive outcome, which is why Eisenhower took the time in like 19, whatever the hell, you know, I want to say 54, but yeah, so shout out to it. But yeah, so when we see these things, man, when you're looking at oil, and that's another thing, you know what I mean? You got the military industrial complex, but then you got old energy, old oil, you know, you've got these power flows and structures and relationships, you know, and then when you get into the intelligence apparatus, shout out to the spooky folks. But it's a lot, guys, you know. But our knowledge and understanding these assets is the way that we empower each other to be able to have a check on these messed up powers, and to have sovereignty and liberty, you know, because people that know how to use these assets together can go and create that awesome, you know, community. That's one of the things I'm liking a lot of the kind of the discussions about people having farms and growing food. I like hearing the pushback against glyphosate, which is obviously that should be like flashing every alarm bell in the people of America's like, dude, do you realize you cannot sell like the ketchup, Heinz ketchup that you buy in America, you can't buy in Canada. You can't buy in France and shit because they don't allow like high fructose corn syrup and different dyes and things like glyphosate. You know, so when you also look at like our wheat, like that, there's a whole thing here, man. And when we hear that they passed a law preemptively protecting some of these interests from people saying, "Hey, yo, you know, my baby's got you know, some whatever, you know, whatever can happen with exposure to these carcinogens and shit." You know, so I'm bullish on that. I'm bullish on the pushback. But that is why when people say, "Oh, Bitcoin fixes this," they're talking about that by having sound money. And when politicians can't be bought and paid for by dollars, when okay, no more money printer for you. No more, okay, I'll go along to get along. No. You know, we've really messed up, you know, how the average American feels about their possibility for having a hopeful future in America. That's not good. That's not right. And we can do better. And that we do that at midnight. And with Cardano and with Monero and Zcash and Bitcoin and Litecoin. Um, yeah, in sooth, I really think Litecoin is shout out to I don't know where the hearts are coming from, but I see them and I do appreciate it. And thank you. That lets me know that the stream is live because it'll say connectivity issues every once in a while and whatnot. And hey, shout out to the first one over the 2 hour mark. First live stream over 2 hours. Consent is sexy. But yeah, first one that I've done over 2 hours. Again, I think I'm going to go between 1 and 3, and then cap it. This has been a far-ranging conversation, but it is in keeping with what I want it to be because I don't want this to be just a Cardano thing. I want it to be the way in which we all make the most money. We need better Bitcoin conversations. We need better Litecoin conversations, And to Litecoin's credit, there's not like a toxic community. There's just not a lot. Shout out to Flippin' Finance. He's, and shout out to Circle Crypto Aztec. Let's go. So they're out there and Rock and those folks. But yeah, man, and shout out to the Cardano. Now, the reason why there's been so much Cardano is truly when you look at the opportunities that exist in this paradigm, the underperformance of something like a Cardano asset does build in a heck of an upside multiple. I mean, again, Bitcoin, if it doubled its price, it's damn near its all-time high from 61, right? What if that went to 122, right? Whereas like Cardano, look at that, double that, we're at 16 cents, man. You know what I mean? So let's eat up shit. Round that down to like say 15, double that, 30 cents, and we could do that again. We got multiples that we can hit in Cardano. You know what I mean? But be responsible, right? And again, I'm poor. I got nothing. I got all the boat accidents. Let's just say I've had too much exposure to Cardano. You know what I mean? It's been bad, guys. And all of us, bro. Anyone out there that's in whatever, whether you're Solana, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Buddha bless you, man. You know what I mean? Stay with it. We are being shaken out by suits and whatnot, and it will get better. And one of the ways that it gets better is us understanding we have so much control. We have so much control with unity. When it's not just me and it's not just you, it's all of us. And we all go, hold up. No. We know how to do this. We know how to, we know what time it is. Again, that's how Zcash has done what it's done. There's only 21 million Zcash, supply constrained, and there's not a lot of holders, right? And the holders kind of know each other. So that network, because they're like, hey, let's do this thing, that did allow them to kind of keep on the same page. That is another low-key benefit of Charlie Lee selling when he did. One, there's no Satoshi's overhang. It's gone. Right. But also when he did that, he pissed off a lot of people that would have built these cabals like we have in Zcash, but for Zcash's spot price, that was how they were able to run it up. So that's the thing is when the Cardano community goes, hold on, bet we can actually run this bitch up. We don't need anyone helping us. We just need to know what time it is and act in unity, And so that same opportunity exists for Night. And it exists for Litecoin, and it exists for Pepecoin and Dogecoin. It exists for all of these. You know what I mean? But there's different advantages. You know what I mean? Again, if you have a hard cap supply, like that's why the sovereign digital asset, those three things that are kind of like hard cap supply, UTXO basis, and global decentralization and distribution of the validation and consensus mechanism and the publicly distributed ledger associated therewith. There's very few things that fit that last one. Like Caspa is not a sovereign digital asset because it doesn't fit that last one. It's not decentralized enough yet to where you could say you could spend it at all points in the earth, ready on ramps and off ramps. Nothing's going to stop it, right? Who knows how distributed the Caspa set, but it has a road to get there because there is a supply cap to Caspa. It is a UTXO based blockchain. You know what I mean? And so, Bitcoin Cash, you know what I mean? That's, I think, close to what, because it's got a hard cap supply, UTXO basis. But again, the distribution of that validation and consensus mechanism and the copies of the ledger, that's important, and when Solana is 600 terabytes from a hardware, it's more than $250,000 in just hardware to hold the ledger size of Solana. And then when you also need stake, to validate, kind of like how you need ADA in your stake pool. So it's like, it is hard to distribute, to have a distributed validator set in Solana, whereas Cardano's blockchain, you can fit the whole history of instead of 600 terabytes, it's less than 500 gigabytes. It's about half. It's about half of a terabyte to hold all of Cardano's history. Litecoin, 100 gigabytes, a tenth of a terabyte. and Bitcoin's at around 1 terabyte. Even Ethereum is around 1.2-ish terabytes or 1.4-ish. So again, when you look at these ledgers from the L1, you realize there are some freedom principles, that if you stack them up, you get these powerful instruments. You know what I mean? Like the Bitcoin is a sovereign digital asset. It is a hard cap supply. It's set the UTXO basis. There's many reasons for the UTXO basis, actually, because of this security, parallelism, mathematical, formalism, determinism, all that cool shit. And the adoption and the existence of Bitcoin is what is establishing that liquidity layer. So there is a cantus firmus, if you like, a base of that pyramid that exists in a UTXO set. And the power of a UTXO set is if you're the custodian of those keys, you can express that capital. And if you express a UTXO set on another UTXO set with the appropriate smart contract, and or exchange mechanism, you can have a custodian of capital that is globally powerful. Where you flow, like say you want participation in Strike, there are now roads where you can get from your Bitcoin capital to Strike, and then boom, with Strike, right now I haven't looked at the token, but it was yielding. Its stake in Strike was like over 30%. It's like 24%. It's crazy. So go do your own research. But when people understand, oh wow, I can just do that. You know what I mean? And then you go, oh shit, I can also go to this Litecoin set or this Monero set or the Zcash set. You know what I mean? And as these blockchains evolve, you can flow your capital. But by having an understanding of, oh, these assets have security and vulnerabilities with the EVM and accounts model and infinite supply, right? So maybe you want to be in Solana to maybe make some money, but understand that if you want to keep that money, maybe you should store that capital in the Bitcoin set or the Litecoin set, which are really exceptional for that longer term capital. But yeah, I mean, I think Litecoin's very well positioned. But as far as expressiveness, Cardano is the most expressive of the UTXO set. Like that is what Charles Hoskinson chose to do, that I will always respect and very much appreciate. And again, as far as Cardano, as like what do we push forward with as a community? Not only are there these cool projects like the Cardano Keeps, we've got the Midnight Galleries, we've got the crypto treasure quests. I really like the treasure quest idea. That is onboarding the way. With Mithril, they managed to create snapshots of Cardano chain and check on the history without downloading the whole history. Basically, the whole chain inside your wallet. Amen, Wolfodin. Exactly. So yeah, for folks that don't know what Mithril is, you can basically become like, you could do a Mithril signature. So imagine you have a stake pool operator that has proven that, hey, I've been validating the Bitcoin or the Cardano blockchain for the last 2 years perfectly. You can then assign greater weight. They can then become a Mithril signature assigner. And so what that means is if a new participant in the blockchain says, oh, hi, Cardano, I'd like to, what is the current assignment of the UTXO set? I want to use it. I want to access a wallet, get a light wallet going, whatever it is, you want to access the state of the blockchain. Having these Mithril signatures allows people to go, oh yeah, query this set. It's like a vetted and proven, like there's public metrics that allow you to achieve Mithril signer status. And then, yeah, you can bootstrap wallets like that. 300 SPOs in talks to get this update. So amen. Love it. So that's the other power of like a Cardano collective, is getting those SPOs together, because then we can literally make things like Mithril signatures more powerful. So now get this. I've been thinking about a concept that I call the Mithril Meadow, which is exactly that, where imagine having it the SPO, because unlike Solana, that's 600 terabytes for the ledger, imagine every Cardano SPO has a copy of the Zcash ledger, the Litecoin ledger, the Monero ledger. All of these things are very cheap capitally, not a lot of extra overhead. And when we create them as like the Mithril, which becomes the Mithril Meadow, where we've got this a network of SPOs that know the current and hold locally the live state of the ledgers. And then when you start talking about layering in oracles, having lightweight oracles, yeah, bro. Now we're talking about Cardano crystals, bro, which is a plug and play. Imagine a PlayStation 5 that pays your rent every month. And what you are is a plug and play Cardano SPO, and optionally validate the Bitcoin set, the Litecoin set, the Monero set, the Zcash set. And when you look at, shout out to Iagon, shout out to their Iagon Cyclone, right? When you look at that, that has 16 terabytes encrypted data storage. That would fit Bitcoin, Litecoin, Zcash, Monero, Dogecoin, Pepecoin. Feel me? All amen, bro. So that, to me, this is what Cardano should be going. That is what we are. That is the grand unified UTXO theory, by the way, as well, right? It's just saying that there are many different combinations of UTXO based blockchains that exist that can be made to create value. Every one of us is free to avail ourselves of this grand unified UTXO theory. That the more conversant we are, GUUT, yep, grand unified UTXO theory. I actually, man, in developing it, I was thinking you could also have UTU, the unified theory of UTXO, could be, you could say that's only blockchains with hard cap supplies, and then you have the grand unified UTXO theories, including the infinite ones like Dogecoin, Monero, Pepecoin. So yeah, I mean, it's shared nomenclature is powerful, but also for marketing, right? Because GUUT is also like old Germanic for like good, but it's also kind of like gut, so you can do trust your gut, or the home of good hope. Cardano is the home of good hope. And that's GUUT, the Grand Unified UTXO theory, which is Cardano becomes the smart contracts for all of them. But then hope is how oppressed people escape. So then people start thinking about, oh shit, Cardano's the Matrix phone. That's, oh God, I need to escape. I need to get freedom. I need to find cool people. Well, welcome to the Cardano Collective and the home of good hope, bish. Here you can find your way to Monero, Zcash, we celebrate liberty here. Follow your freedom and find it. We got Bitcoin freedom, Litecoin liberty, and you already know what time it is on Cardano. So yeah, you know what I mean? It's that. That is what the community, I think, can build together. Take that energy forward. And yeah, we don't, I mean, with love and respect, we should draw a line at Laos and Paris and say, cool, Chuck, but now you get to bid for the open work. Research is important, but bro, honestly, you've got enough money. You should be able to keep those employees that you have well fed and whatnot by respecting ADA and respecting Midnight. If you do your job, and he's saying, I don't want to be a businessman. Fine. I'm your Huckleberry. You know what I mean? I know what I can do. I'll show you how great I am. Man, there's no one out here like me. You know what I mean? And there's many people like, that are similarly singular, novel in what they can contribute to this global collective of powerful people coming together to create hope and cool things together, and that's what I love, bro. You know what I mean? Like that to me is what I would be doing with it, with my finite hours, bro. Anyone that has ever had a medical issue, I mean, no one is guaranteed it tomorrow. No one is guaranteed it tomorrow. Like, bro, I mean, it happens every day. You see, anyway, man. Yeah. Yeah. But in a finite life, when I look back, the things that I value the most are time spent with free people. You know what I mean? And it's weird. It's like by having culture where people are free to do their thing and they have money, they have freedom of expression and all this stuff. You have those moments where you're hanging out with friends at that gallery, with a glass of wine and maybe a mushroom or whatever. You know what I mean? And so when you realize, whoa, by having people that believe in the future, that own their homes, can have businesses, have sound money and all these things, it creates an environment where people that aren't me, if I had children, that they would have those things. You know what I mean? So to me, it's like, I don't feel like I need to have those babies to care about the experience of all the humans that are going to come after me. You know what I mean? And that's what's also funny is people think about like, well, you got to have babies to have a legacy. It's like, bro, think about Shakespeare, right? Did Shakespeare have kids? I don't know. I actually think maybe not. I think there is some writing that said he has kids. But the point is any of Shakespeare's whatever living? But as they say, I think Shakespeare is said to have said, right, the test of time, your influence in the world, like Isaac Newton didn't have children. Hey, oh gosh, father of the modern computing or whatever, Alan Turing didn't have children, was unfortunately murdered by virtue in a way. He committed suicide. He was the father of modern computing. He was apparently a homosexual, and people were like, oh, well, because they were so weird about it. They were like, well, that must mean that you want to be a woman. And he's like, well, maybe he's just gay. You know what I mean? But they basically made him have a sex change, and he's like, and that fucked him up. You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine being forced to do that in like the 1960s? And mind you, you're the guy that broke the Enigma machine. Like, anyway. So point is, you will know them by their fruit, as Jesus is said to have said. So create good fruit. You know what I mean? And I think that we can have value and persistence and resonance. And impact beyond our temporal durance, like however long we might live, without having children. Like, you don't have to have children, but I think we should be able to create. There's a reason people aren't having babies, and that's sad because there are people that would like to have babies that can't. You know what I mean? I had a friend that just had their first baby like not too long ago, more than 20 G's, and these people have insurance, but they're Americans, and the average baby is over $20,000. Theirs was like close to 25, just to have the baby and pay the hospital bills. It's insane. It's insane. Um, so, and then 25 grand is way, way more than the minimum wage in America, which is, again, like 25 is about 52,000 a year. And if you do the round numbers, okay, about $36,000 before taxes, and obviously, is basically your baseline for a roof and food, because, dude, take 2,000 a month for shelter. Say that's your shelter and like heat, so that your shelter is actually like viable to keep yourself alive, right? And then throw even in your utilities in the 2,000, right? So you got 2,000 times 12, that's 24 grand baseline for shelter and it's functional. And then to feed yourself, add another 1,000 a month, so 36,000 is for like shelter and food, right? That's already well over the federal minimum, which is less than 16 grand before taxes at full time. You know what I mean? So all of the shit is out of whack. And the way that we start fixing that, because I'm not going to wait on Nancy Pelosi or Elizabeth Warren to figure it out. Elizabeth Warren, again, she's not stopping bad things, and she's not even helping good things happen. And when good things are happening, she's making herself the chief antagonist against good things. Please stop stamping on my liberty, Elizabeth Warren. It's like, again, if you're not going to help things stop hurting the people, at least don't limit their peaceful free market solutions, like Bitcoin and Litecoin and cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, because they're not all created equal. Okay. Like Solana, infinite supply, not the same as, some of these other ones, pumping it. And again, and who are you, Elizabeth? It's like, if you can't stop the problems, please don't limit my liberty. Go figure out your situation. But anyway, but yeah, man. So like the Cardano Collective, things like that is, I think, by empowering the Cardano Collective, not only do you change the fortunes of what ADA can do and what Knight can do, but by being that home of Good Hope, of the grand unified UTXO theory, when you extend that mithril meadow and you start having people using Cardano to do lending and borrowing with their Litecoin, because, bro, shout out to Fluid Tokens and El Raulito and Mateo. For folks who don't know, the Bifrost Bridge, speaking of, it's kind of like Rhapsodies on Mithril. And shout out to like Midgard. There's so many cool like scaling solutions that are coming that are just going to unlock the way that people are going to be able to create DeFi products. Because get this, bro. Like, oh my God, it's just so cool. Never mind. I was going to go on a whole thing about how basically you can say, okay, here's an address, right? Prove that you're like a custodian of the address. You then fund it with like a certain quantity of Dogecoin. And then that's anyone in the world can say, oh, what does the Dogecoin say? And you go, oh shit, look, that was the address that was at a zero value, that then they said whatever. So then that Oracle goes, bet that, and so you can start building entry into smart contracts and whatnot. So the Bifrost Bridge, love what they're doing. Fluid Tokens, they actually, I think, had the first like ordinal exchange, like decentralized exchange. So they've been building. Fluid Tokens literally has two platforms for like Bitcoin. I'm sure they're gonna like eventually like unify them. But yeah, you can do Bitcoin stuff and then Cardano / Midnight stuff. But one of their projects that they're building with this Bifrost Bridge is the Bitcoin DeFi piece. And that's going to be built into like the SPO level. And what's cool though is the Bifrost Bridge model can be extended through like a grand unified UTXO theory, and it can include the Dogecoin set and the Litecoin set and the Monero set. And so if you think like, if you consider the concept of like the Mithril Meadow, when you create an incentive, a game theoretical and monetary incentive for these SPOs to go, bet I'll hold a live copy of the Monero set and the Zcash set, and all it is really hard drive space. You're not validating it. You're just saying that's what the chain says. You know what I mean? And then also, here's another thing. All the Cardano SPOs become Litecoin, or rather Lightning Network nodes. You know what I mean? That's a whole other thing about like, man, the value propositions for Cardano. They can also, because that's a whole other thing. People they sleep on what it is required to actually custody. If you have your Satoshis running on the Lightning Network, unless you are willing to close the channels to which those UTXOs are committed to, you're not custodying them. You know what I mean? So it's like Cardano also can help, it just, yeah, it's so cool. I love that. So so yeah, so this again, this is all of that is to say that the intention for this is not to be like any one blockchain, you know what I mean, or even blockchains all the time, you know what I mean. Like 'cause I like a lot of things, man. I like math and physics, I like music, I like art, I like a lot of shit, you know what I mean. And so yeah, sometimes I might, read, like for instance, I think everyone should really read the classics. Like shout out to the Harvard classics, for folks that don't, yeah. But I was thinking of Nikola Tesla's My Inventions, actually. Nikola, it's great. Like not a lot of people may know that like Nikola Tesla like left that firsthand like work like that. It's not so, and it's like Einstein's relativity is wildly accessible. You know what I mean? And yeah, so sometimes, I'm thinking about like a side project, like shout out to like book.io and audiobooks and things like that. That's another thing. Like on the last thing we were talking about how odds markets, how we could increase transaction fees on Cardano and through midnight by having, right, like when these UFC fights or big boxing events, start having folks, go, oh, you're interested in this, great, and you start having cross-chain, communities, say, pick parlays together, do competitive wallets, have team wallets, and all kinds of different ways that we can layer the social, dynamic, or people that are celebrating, like the Knicks, right? Like the NBA. I think it's the NBA, but I don't even know. That's how untapped I am. But yeah, so there's so much that has been slept on for how to create business and engagement and use of the blockchain. But as we develop those networks on Cardano, we can help enrich the XRP set as well, and the Ethereum and Solana set, even though they're outside of the grand unified UTXO theory because they're not UTXO based blockchains. Those communities are still valid. I would hope that we offer compelling enough solutions on Cardano and Midnight and whatnot that they go, hey, bet we can get what we're getting with Solana, but better security, right? Right now, where they beat us is speed, right? You can do things really fast, and that's why Laos and Paris, right? We know that there are upgrades coming to Cardano. We know Midgard's coming, all these things. And so yeah, when we also talk about like mithril signatures, like and the notion of a mithril meadow and Bifrost being extended from just Bitcoin DeFi to all of these other ones, Monero and Zcash and Bitcoin Cash. It's just crazy, bro. And then again, that also helps Cardano SPOs and infrastructures, have multiple new revenue streams, because then a Cardano crystal, for instance, you can get a cut. Because get this, bro. Tether was the most profitable company in the world per employee for a while there. And think about all that Tether is doing. They're just getting their little percentage, their 1%, when you go from Tether to Solana, to Solana to Tether to Ethereum, to shitcoin to fartcoin to Tether to da Tether. Suddenly, Cardano SPOs go, bet all of our SPOs, or those that opt in, are holding a copy of the Monero set and the Zcash set and the da. And oh, you want to swap? Well, boom, right? Built right into all of our dexes, and even at the SPO level where people can atomically swap between Bitcoin to Monero to Zcash, because that is how you unlock the power of Monero. So it's things like that. And they have such a fervent community, because that is really the biggest reason why I mention Solana and Ethereum. I personally think there are many, many reasons to not touch them with a 10-foot pole. Personally, that said, you're right. I often talk about the I call it the $30 billion of dumb lesson from Doge, which is when Dogecoin launched. I was like, bro, this is just, it's a stupid dog, right? This is absurd. Who would, whatever. And then I promptly sat on the sidelines and missed out on that money and realized, oh yeah, if I model the market commensurate with my, kind of participation and, whatever, you're going to miss that. You know what I mean? So on the Ethereum and the Solana side, VCs have spent a lot of money to get people to adopt Solana, get it in their wallets, the bonk airdrop. There's a whole, distribution method that they did very successfully. So to me, the goal is educate those communities, build relationships with those communities, and give them reasons to migrate that capital. So that when the network goes out, right, and or if they say the wrong thing, because that's the thing is, as that validator set gets more and more limited, right, then if you piss someone off and they know, oh, that's your Solana address, and there's only 20 people that validate it, whereas Cardano, thousands of different stake pools across the world, but it's going to be important for us to keep them to give those incentives to keep them healthy. And that's things like a Cardano collective helps stake pools become healthy, helps stake pools maintain delegation, helps stake pools grow delegation. And then when you have those stake pools moving in unity, going, yeah, bro, our stake pool network is going to use for this epoch, we're going to swap our ADA rewards for Strike. You know what I mean? Or maybe there's a brand new blockchain project that comes in the Cardano Collective. They say, "Hey, we're going to do something cool," and so then the Cardano Collective goes, "Okay, bet." Right? And so our SPO set goes here. We're going to help you do your initial coin offering for a little bit of equity, a little participation. The Cardano Collective SPO network gets 6% split between, or whatever it is. These kinds of models that together we can start getting liquidity and support and revenue and value flowing to the builders, not having to go through Chuck or Catalyst or none of that. And we can build it using the infra, not, hey, appease the cabal, yeah, that's just bad. That's not the way. And so that's what's cool is built into the protocol. We can make it better. And so, bro, there's a notion called 10 totems. It's a scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium model. And there's a couple. There's GUT, the Grand Unified UTXO theory, is a sane model. Scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium can be created by using different collections, groupings of these blockchains, like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Monero. There's many different roads. There is a maximizing one. That's a cool thing to find, and that's how we trend towards Nash equilibrium. But it becomes scalable and algorithmic, for instance. So these same treasuries would be this. We had this Draper proposal, right? Just however many million. So setting that aside, let's say the Treasury funded a 25 million ADA allocation, okay? And we took that 25 million ADA and we used that to support stablecoin liquidity depth, something like a Strike, you know what I mean? And then also gain exposure to like Bitcoin, da 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 da. The point is 25 million ADA yielding 8%. Now, 8% is not an aggressive number. You can get there with stablecoins alone. You know what I mean? When you look at like fiat stablecoins and then over collateralized and algorithmic ones, like JED tends to have a higher interest like return than the fiat ones, and then IUSD, which is, so there's all these things. So basically, you could create a bot, like you could create an agentic intelligence that manages this treasury, right? And all it's doing is saying, oh, I'm going to take 70% of this, 25 million ADA, 50% is going to be fiat-backed stablecoins. So it's going to live manage a portfolio that's just fiat-backed. So that's USDM, maybe ANZNs, USDC, right? And that's gaining yield. And then with 20%, still stablecoins, but over collateralized, algorithmic with the freedom stables that aren't fiat-backed one-to-one. So those tend to return more. And then with 30%, right, you've got what I think I put it like 15 to support things like Strike and builders on Cardano, and then have another 15 or 10 or whatever the hell it was that would be like Bitcoin exposure, Litecoin exposure, Monero exposure, which again, as it develops, we're going to have smart contracts and services, that Monero can access on Cardano as well. So it's like, so then using that productive, so again, just 8%, which is very modest, of a 25 million inaugural treasury, you could airdrop every 5-day epoch. So again, I'm articulating a model where you don't have to suck anyone's D, okay? What if it's just post an address and gain delegation? If you are in the top 10 and you're above a minimum threshold, so it's like maybe a million ADA is the minimum threshold to get a 10 totems airdrop. So for instance, we want to find and fund 10 content creators. The 25 million ADA yielding 8% returns 2 million ADA per year. Okay, so you go to the 10 Totems Global Governance Hub, go to the marketing and content creators, and go, hi, I'm Cliff Kaye. This is my address. Vote for me, if you delegate to me. And then if I break into that top 10 and boom, well, then they go, oh, great, you're a 10 totem holder. So basically the totem would be like a dynamic NFT. Wherever that NFT is where the airdrop goes. But it doesn't need to be that complex it depends on smart contract. I like the idea of an NFT, and basically every epoch, the smart contract will query that delegation hub and say, who are the top 10 content creators whose wallets are delegated to, saying the community believes in you. We want to support you. And then what happens is you get, when you do the math, it's like 2,700 and change ADA every 5 days. And that's just, you take 2 million and you divide it by like 73, which is how many epochs, the 5 days there are on 365. And so every epoch, you could, basically, yeah, 2,700 or whatever for 10 people. And so how does it become scalable algorithmic? 10 people, like say this, right? So me and 9 other people are out here every day talking about, oh, this is what's these fights are coming up, and oh, there's hey strike, and oh wow, Litecoin, what are you doing with that? And oh, that all the shit. 10 people doing that are allocating that airdrop and supporting the ecosystem and stewarding the treasury. Because remember, unlike Charles and Cardano Foundation and Emergo, who love to come out with their handout and burn their principal, a 10 totems treasury pays people with yield. Pay people with yield. You know what I mean? And so that's what we need to do is we get these 10 totems treasuries where we say 25 million ADA, boom, now we've got 10 content creators. Now get this, right? It's scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium. 10 people like me that are good at what they do, right? That treasury is going to grow. It's going to start at 25 million ADA, but right, what if we launch that new odds market, right? So if I'm one of the 10 totems holders and I'm getting 2,700 ADA every 5 days, so I'm not worried now. I can be brave. I can be free, right? And now I have the time to be here every Saturday with the bodega market. But then I go, hey guys, fellow 10 totem holders, what if 7 of 10 of the 10 totem holders can change the allocation of the treasury? Maybe that's what it takes. You need 7 of the 10 to be able to say, hey, there's a new project launching. Should we allocate some of our 10 totems treasury to produce yield? Should we get participation in this new project because we all believe, hey, this is going to work out. You know what I mean? So there's all kinds of ways where it's scalable, where the 10 people working in their interest, because right, and then and even like personally, right? Like, what if the 10 totem holders, we go to bodega and we go, bet, will you give us 50,000 ADA for the 10 totems treasury? So not to us of the current 10, it will enrich all 10 totem holders in the future. Because remember, it's accountability as well. That's the other thing that I love about this. Every 5 days. So if you're a content creator and you're like, hey, pay me, you're not just going to get a check that pays your bills forever, like what was recently proposed and all this shit. You know what I mean? And if you pay those regular faces, they're not going to be out here telling the truth about Charles and the founding entities. That's the other thing about like paying Wendy O. Like, and again, that's why I would love to get paid for creating content, but I'm willing to compete for it. You know what I mean? Cabal but public and governed by the public. Right. Yeah, it's kind of a public cabal of a kind, but yeah, and it's everyone could see it, right? So shout out to like Nomos Guild, right, who created a governance hub where you can actually see what's voting on Cardano. Before they created that, bro, I didn't know what anyone was doing because I'm not a member of any of this shit. I'm not a member, yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, so Nomos Guild made it really accessible and they open sourced that code. So yeah, dude, it would be so easy to create like a 10 totems global governance hub would be that. Like you would go there, you like say you'd go to the 10 totems and you want to be a marketing and content creator, whatever. You go, cool. Here's my, $, whatever your address is, right? And say, yeah, delegate to me. And then you rise up the ranks. And then, yeah, you meet the minimum threshold. Maybe it's 1 million ADA, and then it's the top 10 people. But then again, if you do the math and you think, okay, it's like 2.5 million ADA per that's generating for each of the 10 totem holders, like whatever, So anyway, so as the 10 totem treasury grows and it goes from say 25 million to 30 million, and I would say you probably do one before then, but you create an 11th totem. You know what I mean? So it doesn't stay 10, right? Because 10 badasses, if they're the right badasses, they're there to help projects grow in value. And if their treasury that is paying their bills is participating in these assets that they're helping market, you know what I mean? Then the treasury grows. And remember, they're living off yield as well. So if it's done correctly and we're yielding at least, that 8%, the treasury is always liquid. And again, if it's done correctly, you have it so that those assets are going to be compounding. And so even when you create an 11th totem and a 12th and a 13th, what's cool is then, again, you're just adding to the number of paid content creators. You're right. And then you could do the same thing for a DREP and a constitutional committee, because people have talked about that. Should people be paid for governance? Well, there could be a similar thing. 25 million ADA split not amongst 10 like content creators, but like DREPs. You could pay every 5-day epoch 100 D-reps, something it's a little over 100 ADA, like every 5 days. Um, yeah, man, there's just better ways to do it, And then I think another one would be open source devs. I think that would be the most dope because then we get literally like a team of open source developers that we then have like 10 badasses. I like to think of them as like the free Ronin of code, like Masterless Samurai, where they're there just to help any, Cardano project that's like, hey, we love help with this, or like, can you help us debug this or whatever? And then also they could just take on their own projects. But again, there's that accountability every epoch. And if a content creator or an open source dev or whatever is not honoring their, what they should be doing, they'll lose delegation. And then if they fall out of the the top 10 or whatever, or they go under the minimum threshold, they cease to be a drain on the treasury. You know what I mean? So hence scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium. You get a game where players, you want to have good players, but you want to have all players in the game that are winning. Yeah, yeah, exactly, bro. Yeah, man, the global governance hub model is the way. And by funding these treasuries with these assets where they're built to pay people on the yield, bro, it's so much more, it's sustaining in a way that the way that we've done with Catalyst, because that's just don't criticize and you'll get paid. It's a fucked up truth. You know what I mean? Because the folks that are running Catalyst, I mean, man, because when you know you're about to get greedy, it helps to make that. I think that's why Draper passed, honestly, is the powers that be were like, look, if as long as we can show that we're having these expenditures for other things, we can just go, and so, yeah, there's just a lot there. But yeah, we can do better. And I think if the people had that, where you didn't have to be a member, you didn't have to, hold so much ADA even to like see it. Now, granted, if you don't hold ADA, you can have an influence on it, but you should be able to see it. It should be able to be a readily accessible website, like what they did with Nomos Guild, where you go to it. Yeah, I forget what it is. But yeah, you go there and boom. And so if we created these treasuries, where there was one, for marketing and content creation, that one, if I think would be the one that I would launch the first, because that's the one that has the potential to grow the fastest. I would say second would be open source developers, because that's another thing. 10 really good open source developers helping, different projects could also get participation in these projects. You know what I mean? And that should be like one of the kind of agreements that you make if you're like one of the totem holders, is you're getting paid by the support of the community. So you should basically agree to like not like take, like private, whatever. Like you should be free to do that, but like as a 10 totem holder, let's say I was an open source dev and I'm working with a project, and they're like, yeah, bro, we'll give you, 20,000 whatever, and I go, okay, cool. Well, give it to the 10 totems treasury, because I'm acting as a 10 totems holder. Like I'm paid, every epoch. And again, as the treasury grows, my airdrop would grow too. You know what I mean? But yeah, so like devs could also make money, but the nature of the work, I think good marketing folks and business development folks, because I think that's overlap. I basically consider your marketing, business developer, content creation, that should all be one, like kind of 10 totems treasury. I would say let people that want to do those things vie for that, and then, but yeah, open source code, because then imagine that. Then we have 10 folks that are basically working for the community. And so when we know there's like the Dingo node, shout out to the Dingo node, bro. Like for folks who don't know what that is, that was a fully performant modern node running, Cardano. But instead of being Haskell based, it was a Go. It's written in Go, and then Amaru is written in Rust. You know what I mean? But what's cool about the Go node, they were basically, their pitch was like 6.5 million ADA, something like that. It's just radically less than what we're getting from these founding entities. So when you think, whoa, if we had a team, of like a 10 totems, hey, are you an open source dev and you want to work on behalf of Cardano? There's no reason why whoever's behind the Dingo node couldn't go, all right, bet, let me get one, and all these, developers and whatnot. They're, anyway. But yeah, then when it comes time to do like upgrades to the protocol, we also basically have a roster of 10 open source engineers to counter, to not only assist with, anyone that's building, but that, yeah, for updating our fundamental protocol, So it's just powerful. It's powerful, you know. And then here's the other thing: why these are better. At a baseline, 10 totems saying treasuries enrich the whole community because of the number one thing that they do. They pay people with yield, and the yield is coming from the blockchain. So it's like by instantiating the treasury, what are you doing? You're adding to stablecoin liquidity depth. The initial proposal that hey, here's an example of what you would do. 70% of the 25 million ADA worth of liquidity is just stablecoins, 50% to fiat backed, 20% to algorithmic, you know? And then with the remainder, I put 10, I would put 10% of that treasury to strike. And then have that because then this treasury that's paying these content creators, that yield is coming from staking strike. So people are, as Strike is kicking ass, right? But then Strike has 10 content creators that are going, oh, bet. You know what I mean? So now you got 10 people out here talking about Strike. You know what I mean? Yeah, you're talking about half out here. Yeah, see, and these are the things though, right? Like, and that's the thing is that was just an example. You know what I mean? Because again, I you know, like it's not like it's hopes and dreams and maybe it's possible. No, just do the fucking math. We just need to choose to do it, and it's better than what we've done. That's way better than Draper. Immediately, stablecoin liquidity depth improves. And Strike has this proposal going like, hey, I actually said that I would mention them. So shout out to Strike. They've got some kind of proposal asking for some treasury stuff. I think it's messed up. Like I think that they should, they should have had the support. They shouldn't have had to do that, but I do wish them well. But that's the kind of thing. These 10 totems treasuries built into the model is supporting people like that. You know what I mean? So like with a 10 totems treasury, absolutely. Like Strike could get support because they're generating yield, So yeah, bro. So 70% to the stable coins is a lot, I'll admit, but that's a need that we have right now in the ecosystem. So again, if I was going to inaugurate a treasury, right now that's how I would allocate it because that also enriches every project building. Bodega, Strike, meme coins, whatever you're doing by making our stablecoin liquidity more robust, you make everything that's building on Cardano healthier, more effective, all this kind of shit. You know what I mean? So yeah, and then you pay people with the yield. And then you don't just write them a check for a year. Like if you really want to do it, you make them compete in the open market where it's like, yeah, bet. Okay, Lily or Pete or Linda or whoever, post your address. Say, hi, I'm Linda. I want to create content for Cardano. If you believe in me, stake your ADA. She rises, and then boom, okay, Linda, you competing in the free market. You didn't have to pretend. And now also, guess what? You're free to actually give real feedback. That's the other better thing about global governance hubs and the 10 totem model is then these content creators and whatnot, they're not beholden to Chuck or Fred. They can actually go, this is fucked up, and I'll tell you why. Because it's the people of Cardano that are delegating to you, which is why you get an airdrop, why you're one of the 10 totem holders, And again, what's really cool is the right 10 people are going to be doing a good job. And that treasury is going to grow. And so instead of having 10 full-time badasses, you get 11 and then 12 and then 13 and then 14 and then 15, until suddenly Cardano has 38 full-time folks with different talents and shit. There's musicians and business creators, just all of it. You know what I mean? And then we have another one with, again, the open source devs, starts with 10, becomes 15, 20, until, and that's how we compete with Chuck and whatnot. And what's beautiful is, unlike Chuck, without the accountability with Chuck is obviously not good at running businesses. He's good at bankrupting them, and Buddha bless him, and I wish him all the success. But imagine that. Imagine those engineers. It's like, bro, if you want to keep this, right, like you got to keep, whatever. So that's the other thing is by having these global governance hubs, if people are dropping the ball or you're not seeing the value return, you go, hey, with love and respect, I'm going to delegate maybe to someone else, that maybe, maybe give them a shot at doing content creation or being one of the open source devs, and again, we can do the same thing with DREPs and governance, with constitutional committee and whatnot, where if you really want to have a competent constitutional committee, imagine having that. And that's another thing though, too, is it would help them decouple their interests. Because right now it is not a coincidence. Like, see, that's the thing, bro. People that know about Cardano, why is it that the leading NFT project, like Clays, right? I mean, they're cool, but are they like that cool? They've stuck around because they've had, whatever. But so when you realize, oh wow, the head of that project also happens to be like a head of like an intersect or a catalyst or a this or that, and you look at the constitutional committee, oh wow, they're also part of like sundial protocol and one of the leading like moneta stable coins. It's this kind of shit. And you realize, oh, that's not healthy. Like there's all these conflicts of interest, all the way down to like the constitutional committee. You know what I mean? So, but you want people that are going to read, the stuff and be informed and whatnot. So there's a lot of reasons why having an independent thing where you could set up a treasury that's productive, that's paying these members of the constitutional committee, which right now it's a 7. It's about to drop. They're talking about dropping it down to like 5 as a minimum threshold. Not that, whatever, but there's all this shit, you know what I mean? And the same thing for like top D reps, start it with the top, 100. But again, governance one, that is not going to grow as fast as like content creators, even open source devs. But if it's done well, and that's the other thing, if the content creators and the open source devs are doing their job, that treasury that's producing for the governance, even that native treasury will grow. So they will also, all of them will, in theory, be able to be scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium inducing models in which every participant acting in their own interest actually advances the state of play of every other player. That's the other beautiful thing, and that's why Cardano is the home of good hope. GUT, GUUT, that is a sane model. That is true that you can achieve scalable algorithmic Nash equilibrium, where everyone that is playing that game, working in their own interests, actually advances their interests, but the interests of everyone else playing the game, and they succeed in the game commensurate with their skill and the moves they have. It's the ideal. That's why Nash equilibrium is such a special state to achieve. But yeah, man, we're at 2 hours 51 minutes. I think I'm gonna call it pumpkin time here in about 9 minutes. So I'm gonna wind this down. But this has been a wide ranging conversation. Thank you, bro. Thank you, Wolfadin, everyone that rolled through the room. Shout out to the Pepe fam, the Litecoin fam, the Bitcoin fam, the Cardano fam, everyone out there doing the thing. Yeah. I'm bullish, man. I'm bullish on what Cardano can be and can create together. And again, it's not like there's that there aren't ideas. You know what I mean? Like again, like that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this is I have been a victim of the situation too. I don't like victim of, but let's just say I've had too much exposure to Charles and Fred and the founding entities incompetence, and no one has paid me. And so got to figure it out, and how do we do that? Start being better advocates. Be like, yo, you guys don't know how to make this money make money. I do. And it's not just, hey, trust me. It's like, bro, listen to this back. You tell me that these stable coins, strike, do the fucking math. Achieving the 8% is possible. Adding the stablecoin liquidity depth fundamentally is going to enrich everyone. So that means if you inaugurated this treasury today, remember, people got to go to the global hub, post their address, right? I would recommend like an ADA handle. You know what I mean? So you admit your, whatever, and say, okay, delegate to me, right? So, but as a baseline, the treasuries would be yielding stable coins and things like Strike. So, even before people would be withdrawing, from the treasury, which again is yield, like we would already start winning. So it's like there's so many ways that we can be expressing our capital and organizing our interests. And so, yeah, so please do join the Cardano Collective Discord. We're going to continue to cook shit out. And again, some objectives that I think would be really great is one, SPOs, just get them together. Just get them. Hi, I'm Ted. I'm Susie. Just like that level, just having that, have them mixing it up, being like, oh, look, and these are all SPOs together. And then we start saying, hey, wouldn't this be cool? And then they start going, oh, bet, And again, things like having their stake rewards acquire Strike, and all these different things. And then by them supporting Strike as an asset starts performing more. As their liquidity grows, their platform performs better. Virtuous cycle. And then DREPs, so that we can unify the quality of, have better conversations. Have people, having that are taking part in the governance, having good conversations, and then having an impact by having a spot where they can all come together and say, hey, cool, us 23 D reps, we represent 1.95 billion ADA worth of whatever kind of thing, and then grow and grow and grow until the Cardano Collective is insert Homelander perfect meme. Yeah, I haven't seen the recent season. I don't think I've seen the last couple seasons of The Boys, but it's good. I liked it. I heard that it maybe had a little fall off. Like, I don't know if it was, I mean, Game of Thrones still, I think they get too much hate for, I think it's because it was so good. Game of Thrones hit such a level that the last season, but they could have done better. They definitely could have done better. But yeah. So shout out to The Boys. And yeah, definitely fuck Homelander though. Ending is perfect. Oh, cool. All right, I'm looking forward to it. Sweet. I'm assuming that they're talking about The Boys ending versus the Game of Thrones ending, because I haven't met many people that thought the Game of Thrones ending was perfect, but yeah. So I think that that'll probably do it for today. That's pretty good. So that's second day. So the goal, guys, and we had more people today than yesterday. I'm literally kind of bootstrapping this also from, like, we've got different whatever, but for various reasons, am choosing to build this from here. See you tomorrow. And in Discord. Oh yeah, for sure, bro, for sure. Yeah, man, we'll be back at this tomorrow. That is the goal, is to establish a regular cadence. I need to start also making some money too. So at some point I'll hopefully figure out that support. But again, at the end of the day, I don't need much to pay my bills. I'm just looking to keep the lights on. Again, this 10 totems holder, put me in, coach. I'm ready to compete. You know what I mean? Let's get these treasuries yielding and whatnot. But yeah, I think that the community, if they tuned into this and they heard what I was saying and was talking about the ways in which we need to improve the quality of the conversation across the board, because if we do, everyone starts winning. To me, the macro model is, bro, we need to get people understanding the power of their self-custody and get assets into DeFi, because I think between now and 2029, we're going to have a major liquidity event in. I think the greatest depression is going to kick off in 20. I was listening to Larry Fink. Larry Fink was talking about 1929 when the Great Depression kicked off, and 2029, which is coming up. You know what I mean? And I think he knows, and because he was basically saying, as we all know that are paying attention, the only way we get out of this domestically, like in America, is we have to grow. And he was even saying there's only a handful of places. You're looking at AI, you're looking at these data centers, you're looking at the SpaceX, but there's and blockchain. There's only a handful of industries. And even then, they're going to have to scream growth like we have never experienced before, which is why the success of these assets is inevitable. The Bitcoins, the Litecoins, the Cardanos, whatnot, if we do our job. So because they had the liquidity extraction event, October 10th, they took a lot of our ability to generate our value here locally. So to me, the game is, when that tide comes back in, we need folks having Bitcoin custody, Litecoin, Monero, Zcash, Cardano, all of it. So, but when it's on chain and it's productive here on Strike and whatnot, we don't have to wait for Daddy to come back. Whereas right now, the crypto markets are all kind of waiting for post clarity. They're waiting because they need the rising tide to be blessed by Wall Street, so we can get our liquidity back. Because the president and his men in the suits really did a number on us. You know what I mean? So that's that. We need to create that informed networking collective so that we can be masters of that capital. And because, again, this leads into the fortress funds. You know what I mean? Like, winter is coming. And so we want to be that collective of people where we're just making money on the blockchain passively. We're helping people secure their liberty. We're doing lending and borrowing in stablecoins. We're doing we're supporting perpetuals platforms. So people that are accessing free markets and whatnot, that's how we're paying our bills. So when the winter comes, we're good. You know what I mean? That's the goal. So between now and 2029, we need to build that coalition. And that's global, bro. My long game goal, in the same way that I want to see people try to go to Mars one day, to try, because of what it means engineering wise, which is, again, our persistence as a species. If we can go to Mars, means it's a matter of our will, not our engineering capability. And we're already there, but a Mars mission makes it whatever. But the other thing, like on this blockchain thing, I would love to have 100 million millionaires in crypto, like crypto native and cryptocurrency assets that they control. Because I think 100 million people all around the world that actually custody their capital with the freedom to have good conversations. We've got friends. I mean, again, like anyone that knows these blockchains, right? And the internet, We're global, bro. You've got friends in Germany and Brazil and Argentina and America and Canada and Australia and all over the place. So if we get 100 million of us that own our capital, can have these conversations, I believe that's the check on the matrix that's being constructed around us, and the powers that be. But it's an active battle, dude. And but we got to rage against the dying of the light. We can lose it. Humanity has been taking it. It's been a rough. Humanity's on the rocks, bro. We are on the ropes. And we'll show them when we've got greatness. And we can do that together. And we can thrive and we can survive. So that's the 3-hour mark. Until tomorrow, guys. Cheers.